Chapter 1734. Zhang Chong. Whoosh. The moment the white-haired elder took out the immortal ascension grass, the human demon stopped. Even though the human demon did not turn around, he could still feel the aura of the immortal ascension grass. As long as you bring me out of this prison, this immortal ascension grass is all yours. Seeing the human demon stop, the white-haired elder's worry lessened a little. Since he had devoured hundreds of martial artists in the prison, the white-haired elder had quite a lot of things on him. In other words, the white-haired elder was not afraid of the human demon asking for an exorbitant price. He was afraid that the human demon would not negotiate with him. In the white-haired elder's opinion, the human demon only wanted magical treasures and pills. Naturally, the white-haired elder would not be stingy with things like magical treasures and pills. It's not impossible for me to bring you out. The human demon looked back at the white-haired elder with a slight frown. The condition is that you give me the immortal ascension grass first. Once I refine it, I will naturally bring you out of this prison. Do you think I'm a fool? Hearing the human demon's words, the white-haired elder went berserk. Giving him the immortal ascension grass first? Isn't that nonsense? The white-haired elder was certain that if he handed over the immortal ascension grass, the human demon would definitely turn around and leave. The white-haired elder would definitely not agree to such a stupid thing. If you insist on being a fool, I won't object. The human demon shrugged and stared at the immortal ascension grass in the white-haired elder's hand. I'll say it one last time. Once I refine the immortal ascension grass, I will naturally bring you out of this prison. Forget it. The white-haired elder was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. The reason why the white-haired elder did not refine the immortal ascension grass after being trapped in the prison for so long was because he wanted to save it for a crucial moment. One had to know that a stalk of immortal ascension grass had the chance to create an existence that surpassed the sages. How could the white-haired elder give such a precious herb to the human demon? Even when the white-haired elder said that he would give the immortal ascension grass to the human demon after he left, it was still a lie. A herb like the immortal ascension grass was rare even in a higher plane. The white-haired elder would definitely keep it for himself. Whoosh! As soon as the white-haired old man uttered the word "no more talk," the human demon seemed to have predicted the white-haired old man's reaction. Grabbing Di Xiao in one hand and Ningyu in the other, he dashed out of the dungeon at a terrifying speed. Don't go, we still have things to talk about. The white-haired old man's expression changed when he saw the human demon leaving. At this moment, the white-haired old man even felt a little regretful. If the human demon really left, what should he do? Was he going to be trapped in the dungeon for the rest of his life? After all, only a late-stage saint would have the ability to take him out of the dungeon. Otherwise, over the years, many experts from the Emperor Divine Palace had entered the dungeon. He would have left long ago. Why would he wait until now? In the white-haired old man's heart, today was the last day he had hoped to leave since he had been imprisoned in the dungeon. Originally, the white-haired old man thought that he had the human devil in his grasp. But now, it seemed that he was too naive. The human demon obviously didn't fall for his trick and turn around to leave. The white-haired old man panicked at the human demon's actions. I can give you half of the immortal ascension grass first. I'll give you the other half after you take me away from here. Whoosh! What a pity. Even though the white-haired old man's voice was loud and urgent, he couldn't stop the human demon. In the blink of an eye, the human demon brought Ningyu and Di Xiao to the entrance of the dungeon. Creak! Di Xiao let out a long sigh as he watched the dungeon door slowly close. To be honest, he had been very nervous when facing the white-haired old man in the dungeon. After all, the white-haired old man was a late-stage saint. If the human demon and the white-haired old man fought in the dungeon, he would be the one to suffer. I'll leave the palace guarding formation to you. Try your best to buy me an hour of time. The human demon's expression was extremely solemn. He looked at Ningyu and said, Also, lend me your Qilin fruit and Qilin heartblood. I'll return them to you when we return to the higher realms. No problem. Without any hesitation, Ningyu took out the Qilin fruit and Qilin heartblood and threw them to the human demon. In fact, Even without the human demon's words, Ningyu already knew what was going on. It must be the backlash from the Qilin lifeblood that the human demon had swallowed earlier. Ningyu knew very well that the human demon's current situation wasn't optimistic. If it was just the backlash from swallowing the Qilin lifeblood, the human demon definitely wouldn't ask for the Qilin fruit and heartblood. But since the human demon had spoken, it meant that the energy seal in his body couldn't be suppressed any longer. Whoosh! Taking the Qilin fruit and heartblood from Ningyu, the human demon's figure gradually turned illusory and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Let's go to the palace guarding formation. After the human demon left, Ningyu didn't linger. Instead, he glanced at Di Xiao and flew toward the palace guarding formation. There were about 10 early-stage Saint Realm cultivators at the palace guarding formation. Before the human demon recovered, how to gain the absolute trust of these 10 saints was a headache for Ningyu. As long as he could gain the trust of these 10 saints, Ningyu could let them control the palace guarding formation. That way, even if Yijiming and Zhangchang returned, they wouldn't be able to easily break the palace guarding formation. The dungeon wasn't very far from the palace guarding formation. It didn't take long for Ningyu and Di Xiao to stop in front of the palace guarding formation. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Because Ningyu was now in Zhangchang's appearance, only 3 cultivators flew over when he stopped. Did anyone suspicious appear during this time? Di Xiao's expression was indifferent as he asked in a low voice according to Ningyu's instructions. One of the short-haired saint warriors frowned slightly, as if he felt that Di Xiao's tone was a bit arrogant. But thinking of Yijiming's instructions before he left, the short-haired saint answered, "No one suspicious appeared." "That's good." Di Xiao nodded and then continued. "Elder, he told us to block the palace guarding formation within an hour. No one is allowed to come in." Buzz. Not long after Di Xiao's words fell, the void outside the palace guarding formation trembled, and then a group of 6 or 7 warriors appeared. Ningyu was very familiar with the 2 leading warriors. They were none other than Yijiming and Zhangchang. "Hurry up and open the palace guarding formation." Yijiming's face was gloomy as he shouted at the palace guarding formation. "Don't be late. I want you to," however, Yijiming stopped abruptly before he could say the word good. Because Yijiming saw Zhangchang next to Di Xiao. To be exact, he saw Zhangchang, who was played by Ningyu. "Who the hell are you?" Yijiming saw Ningyu, and Zhangchang naturally saw him clearly. Suddenly seeing his other self, Zhangchang's whole person became violent. Chapter 1735. Chapter 1735. Chapter 1735. The army's morale shaken blocked the great formation. "Don't let anyone in." Ningyu's expression did not change in the face of Zhangchang's question. He said lightly, "If anyone dares to break into the great formation." At this point, Ningyu paused for a moment before his cold voice rang out. "Kill without mercy." As Ningyu said these words, the 10 warriors at the early stage of the Sage Realm around him immediately changed their expressions. The 10 warriors at the early stage of the Sage Realm were prejudiced. They had long believed that Ningyu was Zhangchang and human demon was Yijiming. Now 2 warriors suddenly appeared, one claiming to be Zhangchang and the other claiming to be Yijiming. How could they not be shocked? Although they were shocked, the 10 warriors at the early stage of the Sage Realm immediately scattered and looked at Yijiming and Zhangchang vigilantly. As long as Yijiming and Zhangchang dared to attack the great formation of the palace without permission, they would definitely activate the great formation to the extreme and kill them. "I'm so angry. I'm so angry." Seeing Ningyu fanning the great formation on the other side, Zhangchang trembled with anger and his nose became crooked. Not only did he pretend to be himself, but he also gave orders. This was really intolerable. Yijiming and Zhangchang had the same idea. At this time, Yijiming's face was gloomy and he could not help clenching his fists. However, Yijiming did not lose his mind. He had brought the great formation of the Emperor Palace from a high-level world, so he knew it very well. Yijiming was very self-aware. He knew that it was impossible for him to break the great formation of the palace with his ability. Even if Zhang Chang and the 4 or 5 warriors at the early stage of the Sage Realm joined in, they would not be able to break the great formation of the palace. If he really angered the fake Zhang Chang inside, he might end up getting himself into trouble. What should I do? Although Zhang Chang looked very angry, he was actually very rational. At such a critical moment, Zhang Chang did not choose to break the great formation of the palace with brute force. Instead, he turned to look at Yi Jiming and said in a deep voice, "You arranged the great formation of the palace. I hope you can break it as soon as possible. I'm thinking of a way." Yi Jiming did not raise his head and said lightly, "Don't rush me." "Don't rush me? Do you think I want to rush you?" Hearing Yi Jiming's irresponsible words, Zhang Chang became even more furious. Zhang Chang didn't care who controlled the Emperor Palace. He only cared about one thing, and that was Zhang Kejuan's life. Zhang Kejuan was the quasi-war god of the Zhang family in the demonic spirit realm. If he died in the Emperor Divine Palace, it would be the end of his family. Di Xiao, what do you think of this matter? Yi Jiming's eyes flickered as he stared at Di Xiao and asked in a deep voice. Yi Jiming had been paying attention to Di Xiao from the corner of his eyes. Yi Jiming could conclude that Zhang Chang was pretending, but Yi Jiming knew that Di Xiao was definitely real, because Di Xiao's few hidden movements almost told him everything that had happened in the Emperor God Palace. However, Yi Jiming was a very suspicious person. Even though Di Xiao had secretly communicated with him, he was still not at ease. In order to verify the authenticity of the news, Yi Jiming decided to test Di Xiao. What do I think? Of course, with my eyes open. Next to Ningyu, Di Xiao rolled his eyes and said, "If I'm not wrong, you two should be Human Demon and Ningyu." "I see." This time, Yi Jiming finally understood. Ningyu and Human Demon didn't leave. Instead, they lurked around. When Yi Jiming and Zhang Chang went to the Emperor's city, they pretended to be them and sneaked into the Emperor Palace. Not only did they sneak into the Emperor Palace, but Ningyu and Human Demon also controlled most of the warriors in the Emperor Palace. However, there was one thing that made Yi Jiming very happy. Ningyu and Human Demon didn't have time to control the 10 early-stage Sage Realm warriors in front of them. In other words, as long as they could handle the 10 early-stage Sage Realm warriors, they could open the Palace Guarding Formation. As long as the Palace Guarding Formation was opened, Yi Jiming was 100% sure that he could easily subdue Ningyu. "I advise you to get out of here as soon as possible, otherwise." Di Xiao took a step forward, and his cold voice resounded in the area. "Palace Master Di, I forgot to remind you that Elder Yi Jiming just asked you to go to the main hall." Ningyu frowned slightly, and then waved his hand to interrupt Di Xiao's words. "I'll keep an eye on this place. You can rest assured." Bad news. As soon as Ningyu opened his mouth, Di Xiao knew that it was bad news. Since Ningyu asked him to leave, he must have found some clues. At this time, Di Xiao even showed a look of fear. The reason why Di Xiao chose to inform Yi Jiming was that he thought that Ningyu couldn't find out, and he didn't want to be controlled by Human Demon. Now that he was discovered by Ningyu, Di Xiao gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice, "Elder Yi Jiming personally said that we must ensure the safety of the Palace Guarding Formation. We must not let anyone break into the Emperor Palace." Haha, Palace Master Di is really righteous. Ningyu smiled slightly and then said no more. Since Di Xiao was sensible, Ningyu didn't want to completely fall out with him. After all, with Di Xiao around, he could still stabilize the 10 Saint Realm warriors around. "I'm not righteous, my ass," Di Xiao muttered to himself, and then said loudly, "Everyone, keep your spirits up. Don't lose face for the Emperor Palace." Crack, crack. Yi Jiming saw Di Xiao's change before and after. Yi Jiming clenched his fists, and his face gradually became gloomy. Yi Jiming must find a way to break the Palace Guarding Formation and take back control of the Emperor Palace. Yi Jiming wouldn't hang on to one thing. Since Di Xiao didn't take the bait, his attention naturally shifted to an early-stage Saint Realm warrior around the corner. This early-stage Saint Realm warrior was called Zhao Cheng. He had a crew cut and was not particularly tall. There was a very obvious scar on his forehead. Zhao Cheng. Taking a deep breath, Yi Jiming stared at Zhao Cheng and said coldly, 3 years ago, in Lin Yuenga, you had a conflict with a middle-stage Saint Realm warrior. If I hadn't arrived in time, your head would have been split open. But even if I arrived in time, there was still an indelible scar on your forehead. 2 years ago, in the Forest of Ruins, you were chased by a middle-stage Saint Realm demon beast. If I hadn't helped you stall that demon beast, you would have died. A year ago, you suffered from chi deviation. It was me who protected you and made sure that you were safe. 3 months ago, the sect, boom. He Jiming's words caused Zhao Cheng's eyes to widen. His entire body froze on the spot. Zhao Cheng was very confused. Was this He Jiming in front of him the real He Jiming? Why did he know so much about me? At this moment, Zhao Cheng's heart began to waver. Although He Jiming's words made sense, Zhao Cheng still didn't dare to open the palace guarding formation. There was no other reason. Zhao Cheng didn't dare to take the risk. Chapter 1736. Chapter 1736. Chapter 1736. Crack with all your might. Looks like we won't be able to stall for much longer. He Jiming's actions were completely seen by Ningyu. Originally, Ningyu thought that as long as he controlled the Emperor Shao and used it to threaten the 10 early-stage Saint Realm warriors, He Jiming would be restricted to death. But now it seemed that He Jiming, this old fox, was indeed not simple. After talking about Zhao Cheng, He Jiming began to talk about the second early-stage sage, Liang Xing. If He Jiming's understanding of Zhao Cheng was not thorough enough, then his understanding of Liang Xing was simply a little insane. He Jiming even told him the exact time when Liang Xing wet the bed when he was young and peeked at the widow next door bathing. Enough. In the end, He Jiming only stopped when Liang Xing flipped out. However, He Jiming was not someone who would give up easily. Since Liang Xing could not say anything, his target immediately shifted to the third martial artist. Hence, in the next half an hour, He Jiming recounted the rise and fall of the remaining 8 warriors. He Jiming's move of removing the firewood from under the cauldron indeed had a great effect. At this moment, at least 4 or 5 of the 10 early-stage sage warriors chose to believe that He Jiming was the real He Jiming. As for the other 4 or 5 early-stage Saint Realm warriors, they chose to remain neutral and not help either side. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Another 10 minutes passed. The 5 early-stage sage martial artists couldn't help but rush out and begin to crack the palace protecting formation from the inside. He's finally here. Ningyu did not panic at all. Instead, he was calm. The rebellion of 5 early-stage Sage Realm warriors would not be a big deal. Di Xiao, go stop them. The look in Ningyu's eyes turned cold and gloomy. He sent a message to Di Xiao through his soul. There are still 20 minutes before the demi-demon fully recovers. No matter what, you have to hold him off for 20 minutes. As long as you can stall for 20 minutes, I can consider letting the human demon remove his control over you. Upon hearing Ningyu's words, Di Xiao's face turned a little solemn. Ever since he had been controlled by the human devil, Di Xiao had been trying to find a way to get rid of it. Unfortunately, with Di Xiao's current strength, it was impossible for him to break the demon's control over him. Ningyu's proposal moved Di Xiao a little. You have to swear a heavenly oath. Although he was tempted, Di Xiao would not completely trust Ningyu. Di Xiao would only feel at ease if Ningyu made the heavenly oath. I swear to the heavenly Tao that as long as you hold on for 20 minutes, I will definitely let the human demon remove his control over you and return you your freedom. Ningyu did not argue with Di Xiao. He directly swore a heavenly Tao oath. Xiao. With Ningyu's promise, Di Xiao immediately rushed out and floated in the air. He said loudly, "Everyone calm down. We can't just listen to their side of the story." When Elder He Jiming went to Divine Emperor City, he brought 4 or 5 early-stage Sage Realm warriors with him. Those 4 warriors haven't returned yet. I believe they must know about your origins. Whoosh! Di Xiao's words were flawless. The 5 early-stage Sage Realm warriors hurriedly withdrew their attacks and looked a little embarrassed. If things were really as Di Xiao said, then they would definitely be in trouble when He Jiming rushed over if they opened the protective formation rashly. Thinking of this, two early-stage Sage Realm warriors looked at Di Xiao with gratitude. Seeing the reaction of the two warriors, Di Xiao's mouth could not help but twitch a few times. "You are grateful to me now, but when you know the truth, you will definitely scold me and my ancestors. What should we do now?" Seeing that Di Xiao had destroyed He Jiming's 4-hour effort with just a few words, Zhang Chong became more and more worried. "What else can we do? Let's attack together and attack the protective formation." He Jiming's eyes showed a determined look. "Are you kidding me?" Zhang Chong directly denied and said coldly, "Even if we join forces, we won't be able to break the protective formation." Zhang Chong was very self-aware of his own strength. "Humph! You are boosting others' morale and diminishing your own power." He Jiming snorted and immediately sent a voice transmission to Zhang Chong. "I have already convinced two early-stage Sage Realm warriors inside. At the critical moment, the two warriors inside will naturally help." "Are they reliable?" Zhang Chong was not particularly relieved and asked. "Yes," nodding heavily. He Jiming stomped his feet on the ground and rushed toward the palace protecting formation. Clatter! Seeing He Jiming rush out, the 4 or 5 Sage Realm warriors behind him also rushed out. "Let's go all out." Zhang Chong gritted his teeth and decided to follow He Jiming to do something crazy this time. Zhang Kejuan was in the Emperor Palace. Zhang Chong was very clear that if he wanted to save Zhang Kejuan, he had to break the protective formation. If he could not even break the protective formation, it meant that he could not enter the Emperor Palace. If he could not enter the Emperor Palace, how could he save Zhang Kejuan? Rumble. 2 early-stage Sage Realm warriors and 4 or 5 early-stage Sage Realm warriors attacked together. The scene was very spectacular. All kinds of magic arts flew around, and the void was constantly being attacked, making waves of trembling sounds. "I must recover as soon as possible." The more terrifying the attacks of He Jiming and the others were, the more worried Ningyu was. Although the human demon had promised that he would recover in an hour, who knew if there would be an accident? Accidents could happen at any time. If the human demon could not recover in the stipulated time, he would be in trouble. Although he was worried, Ningyu was very clear that he had no choice but to wait. Tick! Time passed minute by minute. In the blink of an eye, 15 minutes had passed. There were only 5 minutes left before the 1 hour agreed upon by the human demon. In the past 15 minutes, the one who had the biggest headache was Di Xiao. In order to delay for 15 minutes, Di Xiao had confronted 9 early-stage Sage Realm warriors at the same time. Fortunately, there is one person who is stupid. Turning his head to look at the flat-top sage next to him, Di Xiao took a deep breath and thought that it was a close call. Di Xiao thought that he could temporarily suppress the pressure of 9 sages with He Jiming and the law enforcement team of the high-level sections. Last 5 minutes. Di Xiao calmed everyone down while secretly calculating the time agreed upon with Ningyu. Swoosh! However, at this moment, there was a sudden change. The flat-top sage, who had not made a move, suddenly made a move. The flat-top sage injected all the essence chi in his body into his right fist and suddenly punched the weakest area of the protective formation. "It's over." The flat-top sage's action made Di Xiao's heart sink. He even stood on the spot in a daze. Outside, He Jiming and Zhang Chong attacked the protective formation with all their strength, while inside, the flat-top sage attacked the weak point. Inside and outside. Chapter 1737. Chapter 1737. Chapter 1737. Strange. Crack. It turned out that Emperor Xiao had been too optimistic. In less than 3 minutes, the palace protection formation of the Emperor Palace collapsed in just 1 minute. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. After the palace protection formation collapsed, the furious He Jiming and Zhang Chong, as well as the 4 to 5 sage martialists behind them, rushed out. He Jiming and Zhang Chong's goals were clear. Zhang Chong did not stay there. Instead, he went deep into the Emperor Palace to find Zhang Kejuan. As for He Jiming, he stopped in front of Ningyu. He Jiming stared at Ning Yu coldly and said in a deep voice, "You won't be able to escape today. I'll definitely turn you into ashes." Looking at He Jiming's cold eyes, Ning Yu took a deep breath and said, "If you want to turn me into ashes, maybe." Ning Yu stopped abruptly halfway through a sentence. Then, Ning Yu's lips curled up slightly as he said to He Jiming, "I don't have wings, and I don't want to escape." Huh? Ning Yu's sudden move made He Jiming feel a little confused. If He Jiming had been unable to do anything to Ning Yu because of the palace protection formation earlier, then Ning Yu's life was in He Jiming's hands now. How dare he be so arrogant when his life was in someone else's hands? In He Jiming's opinion, this was no longer arrogance. This was clearly stupidity. "You guys go over together and take him down." Although He Jiming looked down on Ning Yu, he was still worried about taking the risk to attack Ning Yu. His life was his. If he acted rashly and Ning Yu had a backup plan, he would definitely be in trouble. Since the palace protection formation had been broken, it was best to let the original 10 sages test Ning Yu's strength. "I'll go." When a flat-top sage heard He Jiming's words, he immediately felt that his opportunity had come. He responded and quickly dashed towards Ning Yu at a terrifying speed. This time, the flat-top sage was just an insignificant person who had descended from a high-level plane. But small people also had big ambitions. Since he had already left a good impression in He Jiming's heart, the flat-top sage decided to follow up his victory and take down Ning Yu in one fell swoop. As long as he could take down Ning Yu, He Jiming would definitely regard him as a direct descendant of the direct descendant when they returned to the higher planes. He Jiming's position in the sect was not simple. The big shots behind him were the higher-ups in the sect. Now that he had a good relationship with He Jiming, no matter how he looked at it, he wouldn't lose out. "You overestimate yourself." Ning Yu had a disdainful look on his face as he watched the flat-top saint charge towards him. "I didn't plan to deal with you at first, but you can't blame me since you came knocking on my door." Ha ha ha. The flat-top sage couldn't help but laugh maniacally when he heard Ning Yu's words. After laughing maniacally, the flat-top sage sped up again and said sinisterly, "I hope you're not so stubborn. Di Xiao, you can make your move now." Ning Yu didn't have time to bicker with the flat-top sage. His soul force surged, and he sent a voice transmission to Di Xiao. "He can die, but leave his corpse for me." Although the flat-top sage was despicable, Ning Yu didn't wish for his corpse to be destroyed just like that. The corpse of a sage could be used to refine puppets. Ning Yu's cultivation was only at the initial Sky Supreme realm, and he would have to face more and more powerhouses in the future. Moreover, the human demon wouldn't always be by his side. Under such circumstances, if he had a dozen sage-level puppets following him, Ning Yu wouldn't have to fear even if he encountered another sage martialist. The corner of Di Zhao's mouth couldn't help but twitch when he heard Ning Yu's instructions. He and the flat-top sage were both at the initial sage realm. Not only did Ning Yu want him to kill the flat-top sage, but he also wanted him to keep the flat-top sage's corpse. How could there be such a good thing in this world? Unless he reached the intermediate sage realm, Ning Yu's request was almost impossible to fulfill. "I'll try my best." After saying this, Di Xiao immediately dashed out. Before the flat-top saint could reach Ning Yu's side, he took the initiative to confront the flat-top saint. Rumble. 2 early-stage sage experts were fighting. Moreover, it was a life-and-death battle. The scene became chaotic for a while. Damn it! Di Zhao's sudden attack left the flat-top sage dumbfounded. The flat-top sage was confident that he could defeat Di Xiao, but with He Jiming around, how would he dare to use his killer move? After cursing inwardly, the flat-top sage turned to look at He Jiming. His meaning was self-evident. The flat-top sage wanted to seek He Jiming's opinion. He Jiming had to give him an answer whether to kill or keep him alive. Let's keep him alive for now. He Jiming's face was ashen and gloomy to the extreme. Di Xiao had made such a huge mistake. Normally, he would be sentenced to death. But He Jiming knew very well that Di Xiao couldn't die. He had brought more than 10 sages down from the high-level planes with only 2 missions. Bringing Di Xiao back to a high-class realm was one of the 2 tasks. If Di Xiao was killed now, wouldn't it mean that he had failed this mission? not long after arriving in the celestial spirit realm. Failing a mission would have a huge impact. It would be fine if the people behind him could withstand the pressure. But if they couldn't, He Jiming was doomed. Perhaps the sect would send another team down. Understood. The flat-top sage nodded heavily after receiving He Jiming's reply. He felt a little more confident. No matter how one looked at it, it wasn't too difficult to just fight Di Xiao without killing him. Damn it, why am I not as smart as the flat-top sage? That's right, I should have done it. Now that the flat-top sage has taken all the benefits, won't we have to eat dirt? Eat dirt? At this rate, we won't even be able to eat dirt. In my opinion, we don't have to eat dirt at all. The flat-top sage's target is Ningyu. Now that he's being held back by Di Xiao, doesn't that mean that our chance has come? Rumble. The last martial artist's words made the rest of the martial artists change expressions. Wasn't that right? The flat-top sage's target was Ningyu, but he was stopped by Di Xiao. As long as they could take down Ningyu, He Jiming would definitely be very happy. If He Jiming was happy, they wouldn't have to worry about the flat-top sage's intelligence. Moreover, He Jiming's original words just now were all of you go together and take him down for me. If they attacked now, they wouldn't be scolded by He Jiming. Whoosh! They attacked as soon as they said they would. The remaining 9 early-stage sages, plus the 5 sages that He Jiming had brought, added up to a total of 14 sages. All of them charged towards Ningyu. With so many sages attacking together, it was a spectacular scene. Finally making a move, the 14 sages attacked together. Not only did Ningyu not escape, but his body slowly rose into the air. If one observed closely, one could see that Ningyu's expression was calm, without a trace of nervousness. Chapter 1738. Attack. What's going on? For some reason, He Jiming's heart tightened when he saw Ningyu's actions. Ningyu is only initial stage Heavenly Supreme. How could he deal with 14 initial stage Sage Realm cultivators? Unless He Jiming hurriedly released his perception. Retreat. He Jiming hastily shouted as soon as he released his perception and had yet to spread it in all directions. Whoosh! The 14 cultivators didn't follow He Jiming's order to retreat. Instead, they stayed in the air and looked back at He Jiming in confusion. They were all confused. They were about to catch Ningyu. Why did He Jiming tell them to retreat? Idiots! Trash! Retreat! Seeing the 14 warriors staring at him foolishly, He Jiming was so angry that he even cursed out loud. He Jiming didn't just sit and wait for death. He released his peak intermediate stage Sage Realm aura while dashing out, hoping to stop the human demon before he could make a move. That's right. He Jiming was furious because he had discovered the human demon hiding behind Ningyu when he released his perception. He Jiming hadn't taken the initiative to attack after breaking the palace protecting array. This was to prevent the human demon's sneak attack. However, He Jiming didn't expect the human demon to be hiding behind Ningyu. At the same time, He Jiming was slightly worried. It would be fine if the human demon had just appeared. However, if the human demon had been hiding behind Ningyu all along, the situation would become a little worse. After all, the human demon had been hiding behind Ningyu for so long. Didn't that mean that the human demon's concealment level was much higher than his? Puff, puff, puff. Even though He Jiming used his full strength, he still couldn't stop the human demon's powerful attack. In just an instant, the human demon appeared in front of the 14 cultivators and threw out 3 punches. The human demon's 3 punches were heavy and powerful. Each punch contained a terrifying force. 3 punches and 3 initial stage Sage Realm cultivators died on the spot. Rumble. No matter how stupid the remaining 11 cultivators were, they reacted at this time. After a brief moment of panic, the remaining 11 martial artists attacked in unison and engaged in a great battle with the human demon. Idiot, get back here! When He Jiming saw that not only did the remaining 11 cultivators not retreat, but they also fought with the demonic humans, he was so shocked that his nose became crooked. He Jiming wouldn't have reacted this way if the human demon was just a mid-stage sage. Most importantly, The aura emanating from the human demon's body had reached the terrifying late-stage Sage realm. 11 warriors of the early stage of the Sage realm had no chance of winning against a warrior of the late stage of the Sage realm. Pucci, Pucci. While He Jiming was speaking, another 2 martial artists were killed by the human demon. Of the 14 martial artists, 5 had died in an instant. This time, the remaining 9 martial artists had learned their lesson. They did not choose to fight head-on with the human demon, but instead fled in all directions. Where are you going? How could the human devil give these martial artists the chance to escape? He opened his mouth and let out a terrifying roar. Buzz! This roar came from the human demon's mouth. Like a stone thrown into a river, ripples spread out in all directions. Pu-pu-pu-pu. This move of the human demons was indiscriminate. In the blink of an eye, the remaining 9 martial artists were all affected by the sound wave, and each of them coughed out a mouthful of blood. Stop right there. The sudden change caused He Jiming to go berserk. Taking a deep breath, He Jiming took out a scroll from his pocket and threw it at the human demon in midair. Retreat. Seeing the scroll in He Jiming's hand, the human demon's expression changed slightly. He grabbed Ningyu and Di Xiao and quickly retreated. Boom! Just as the human demon and Ningyu took a few steps back, the scroll exploded. Pu-pu-pu. The aftermath of the scroll explosion did not hurt Ningyu, the human demon, an arrest. Instead, the few martial artists on his side coughed out blood. The 9 martial artists were already seriously injured by the human demon's sound wave attack. Now that they were accidentally injured by He Jiming, their auras fell to rock bottom. Now, He Jiming was left with 9 seriously injured primary stage sage martial artists and a flat-top sage who had sensed the danger and dodged in advance. Almost instantly, He Jiming's group's fighting strength dropped by a lot. If I don't get my revenge, I'm not human. He Jiming clenched his fists tightly, an extremely vicious expression on his face. He Jiming had never suffered this kind of humiliation even in a higher realm. Who would have thought that after coming to a lower realm, like the immortal spirit realm, he would suffer setbacks again and again, and even lose many of his companions? He Jiming was a vengeful person. He definitely could not tolerate this. I'm sorry that you're not human anymore. At this time, a calm voice sounded in the area. Hearing this, He Jiming's expression changed, and his eyes stared straight ahead. When the scroll exploded, the human demon had disappeared with Ningyu and Di Xiao without a trace. He Jiming did not expect the human demon to return as soon as the scroll exploded. The void split open, and a dozen martial artists appeared in He Jiming's vision. Zhang Chong. Seeing the familiar figure beside the human demon, He Jiming's jaw dropped, his face full of shock. He Jiming could not understand why Zhang Chong would collude with the human demon. Go! The human demon did not give He Jiming much time to think. He waved his hands slightly forward, and a low voice came from his mouth. Anyone who dares to resist will be killed without mercy. Swish! Swish! As the human demon roared, a few martial artists beside him moved at the same time. The 2 figures at the front were Zhang Chong and Di Tianming. Zhang Chong and Di Tianming's target was not the early stage sage, but He Jiming. Zhang Chong was a mid-stage sage, while Di Tianming was a peak early stage sage. Although they could not kill He Jiming if they joined forces, they could still put up a fight. Senior human demon, how much longer can you last? Ningyu looked calm on the surface as he looked at the human demon beside him, but his heart was heavy. He was worried about the human demon because Ningyu knew what he had done. An hour later, the human demon recovered from the backlash. Even though he had recovered, the human demon was still a mid-stage sage. But in order to get through this crisis, the human demon had forcefully refined the remaining Qilin blood in his body. After refining the Qilin blood, the human demon's cultivation had reached the late-stage sage, the peak late-stage sage. However, this peak late-stage sage wasn't very stable. To be more precise, it showed the peak late-stage sage one moment, and the early-stage sage the next. Even so, the first thing the human demon did after recovering to the peak late-stage sage was to sneak attack Zhang Chong. Fortunately, Zhang Chong was too worried about Zhang Kejuan's safety, which gave the human demon the opportunity to successfully control Zhang Chong in his first sneak attack. After controlling Zhang Chong, the human demon wanted Zhang Chong to hide in the void and wait for an opportunity to attack. Unfortunately, the human demon had just killed 5 sages around He Jiming and heavily injured 9 sages when he felt his aura drop sharply. At this time, He Jiming took out a scroll. Chapter 1739. Away. He Jiming probably won't continue fighting. The human demon didn't answer Ning Yu directly. Instead, he looked at the battlefield in the distance and said in a low voice, "As long as I show a strong desire to fight, He Jiming will definitely retreat." Retreat? Ning Yu's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly followed the human demon's line of sight. With He Jiming's strength and his trump card, it shouldn't be too much of a problem to deal with Zhang Chong and Di Tianming. But most importantly, the human demon was all around. With the unknown factor of a human demon, He Jiming didn't dare use his trump card. Since he couldn't use his trump card, He Jiming was under a lot of pressure. Rumble. While Ning Yu was still observing, the outcome of the battle on the other side had already been decided. In just a few minutes, a total of 10 early-stage sage cultivators, including the flat-top sage, were all killed. Damn it! Although He Jiming was entangled with Zhang Chong, the deaths of the flat-top sage and the others didn't escape his eyes. He Jiming clenched his fists tightly and glared at the human demon. Then, he immediately turned around and flew toward the periphery of the Emperor Palace. He Jiming really wanted to use his last trump card, but when he thought of his mission in the immortal spirit realm, he quickly gave up on the idea. He Jiming's thoughts were very simple. Where there's life, there's hope. As long as he could retreat successfully this time, there would be plenty of opportunities to deal with the human demon and the others in the future. He Jiming was a mid-stage sage. If he wanted to leave, Zhang Chong and Di Tianming naturally wouldn't be able to stop him. Almost in an instant, He Jiming disappeared without a trace. Puffed. As soon as He Jiming's foot disappeared, the human demon spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. At the same time, the human demon's aura dropped again. In just a minute, the human demon's aura dropped from the sage realm to the supremacy realm. Moreover, he was a human supremacy. In just a minute, his aura had dropped from the sage realm to the human supremacy realm. It could only be described as terrifying. Di Tianming, stand guard here. The rest, follow me. Human demon turned around and walked toward the main hall of the Emperor Divine Palace with his shaky body. On the way to the main hall of Emperor Celestial Palace, fortunately, Ning Yu supported human demon in time. Otherwise, with human demon's current state, there was no way he could reach the main hall. In the main hall, Ning Yu and Zhang Chong stood on either side of the human demon, while Di Xiao and the other sages stood slightly behind. Ning Yu frowned as he looked at the human demon, whose aura continued to drop. He asked in a low voice, "How confident are you?" Very low. Although Ning Yu didn't say who he was asking, Zhang Chong knew very well that Ning Yu must be asking him. Zhang Chong didn't dare to be negligent. First, he used his perception to probe the human demon. Then, he slightly frowned and said, "I can only suppress the energy seal that is about to explode in his body. As for the other terrifying energy in his body, I can't control it. You first find a way to suppress the energy seal in his body. As for the other terrifying energy, I'll think of a way." Ning Yu knew that Zhang Chong couldn't cure human demon, so he wasn't particularly disappointed with Zhang Chong's answer. At the very least, Zhang Chong could suppress the energy seal in human demon's body so that human demon wouldn't die immediately. As for the other energy in human demon's body, which was the backlash from the Qilin origin blood, only Ning Yu could think of a way to deal with it. Without wasting any time, Ning Yu directly turned around and walked out of the main hall. However, before Ning Yu could leave the main hall, several cold rays of light flew out from human demon's body and entered Ning Yu's mind in the blink of an eye. "Zhang Chong, you..." The sudden change caused Ning Yu's expression to change dramatically. He hurriedly turned around and shouted. However, as soon as Ning Yu turned around, his words came to an abrupt halt. Ningyu originally thought that the cold rays that entered his mind were Zhang Chang's doing, but now it seemed that the cold rays that entered his body were human demons doing. From now on, Zhang Chang and the other's life and death are completely in your hands. Taking a deep breath, human demon used all his strength to say, "After I die, please preserve my body. In the future, when you go to a higher plane, take me with you and find a place to bury me. It'll be like a fallen leaf returning to its roots. Zhang Chang, I hope you'll do your best." Ningyu didn't respond to human demon. Instead, he stared at Zhang Chang and said coldly, "If senior human demon dies before I return, I'll make you pay with your life." Swish! Leaving behind these cold words, Ningyu turned around and flew out of the main hall. When he left the main hall, Ningyu called Di Xiao and the other 5 sages along, just out of the wolf's den and into the tiger's mouth. Looking at Ningyu's departing figure, Zhang Chang's entire person became very dispirited. Although human demon couldn't control his life and death, Ningyu could. Therefore, for the sake of his own life, Zhang Chang could only risk his life to save human demon. At the same time, Zhang Chang was still praying that human demon would be lucky enough to hold on until Ningyu returned. Otherwise, when Ningyu returned, he would definitely be in trouble. Swish! 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 At the same time, a group of 6 or 7 warriors appeared in front of the Emperor Palace's dungeon. Di Xiao, go open the dungeon. Ningyu didn't waste any time as he pointed at the dungeon door in front of him and said. Although Di Xiao was very unwilling, he had to bow under the eaves. He could only bite the bullet and go to the dungeon. Creak! Under Di Xiao's efforts, the thick dungeon door was quickly opened. "The 5 of you lead the way. Di Xiao, follow beside me." Ningyu looked at the 5 sages beside him and said in a deep voice, "Without my permission, no one is allowed to stop." Whoosh! The 5 sages were quite open-minded. Without the slightest hesitation, they immediately entered the dungeon. "Let's go too." After the 5 sages entered the dungeon, Ningyu swept an indifferent glance at Di Xiao and said, "You go in front of me." "No problem." At this time, Di Xiao knew that he couldn't show any dissatisfaction. Ningyu's nerves were highly tensed. If he offended Ningyu now, it was destined that he wouldn't have a good ending. Di Xiao didn't want to use his childishness to challenge Ningyu's bottom line. Compared to the previous time, this time, Ningyu and the rest were very familiar with the path, and their journey was smooth. Not long after, Ningyu and the rest arrived at the end of the narrow passage. In front of them was a spacious area. Where did the owner of the ascending immortal grass go? Ningyu furrowed his brows as he looked at the empty area. He released his perception slightly. Previously, Ningyu and the rest had seen the owner of the ascending immortal grass here. Originally, Ningyu thought that he would be able to see the owner this time. However, the current situation made Ningyu's face a little ugly. If they couldn't find the owner of the ascending immortal grass, they wouldn't be able to find the ascending immortal grass. If they couldn't find the ascending immortal grass, the human demon would definitely be doomed. Chapter 1740. A seeming compromise. If the human devil could hold on for a day or two, Ningyu definitely wouldn't be as worried as he was now. However, the current situation did not allow Ningyu to think too much. He could only place his hopes on the ascending immortal grass. Attack with all your might. Ningyu's expression was solemn. He clenched his right fist and punched out. Rumble. Ningyu had used up almost all of his strength in this attack. Even though the power of Ningyu's attack was already very strong, it didn't even cause a ripple in the open space in front of him. Rumble. Fortunately, seeing Ningyu's attack, Di Xiao and the other 5 sages did not stop and also attacked with all their might. For a time, all kinds of spell techniques flew about in the open space ahead, and the void trembled. Stop! Only after Ningyu and the others had bombarded the area with all their might for 10 minutes did a cry for mercy come from the empty area. Then, a white-haired figure slowly appeared in front of Ningyu and the others. "You're finally willing to show yourself." Ningyu was a little surprised to see the white-haired old man appear out of thin air. Not long ago, when he came here with the human devil, the white-haired old man was still a late-stage sage. But this time, the white-haired old man's cultivation was only at the early stage of the sage realm. Naturally, Ningyu was not afraid of the white-haired old man at the early stage of the sage realm. After all, there were 6 early-stage Saint Realm warriors on his side, including Di Shao. Ningyu was very confident that the 6 initial stage Sage Realm warriors would go up against a white-haired old man. What exactly do all of you want? I'm warning all of you if you dare. The white-haired old man viciously said after seeing that Ningyu's group had stopped their attacks. Boom! However, before the white-haired old man could finish his vicious words, Ningyu and Di Shao launched another attack. A terrifying barrage of spell techniques hurtled toward the white-haired old man from all directions. I can't believe it. Seeing Ningyu and the others attacking without any regard for their lives, the white-haired old man cursed on the spot and hurriedly began to block. However, with the white-haired old man's current strength, it was very difficult for him to withstand the full force attack of 6 sages. Pu. Almost every minute, the white-haired old man would spit out a few mouthfuls of blood. Hold on. We could discuss this. 3 minutes later, the white-haired old man hurriedly said, I can give you the immortal ascension grass if you want it. Ningyu slightly raised his right hand, signaling Di Shao and the others to stop their attacks. With a sharp gaze, Ningyu stared at the white-haired old man and said, Throw the immortal ascension grass over, and we will leave immediately. Let's make a deal. As long as you... Seeing that Ningyu's group had stopped attacking, the white-haired elder's eyes rotated as he spoke. However, before the white-haired old man could finish his sentence, he saw Ningyu's right hand pressing down abruptly. This discovery made the white-haired old man turn pale on the spot, and he immediately changed his words. I am affected by the formation in the dungeon, so I can only stay in this spacious area. If you want the immortal ascension grass, you can come and get it yourself. As he spoke, the white-haired old man took out the immortal ascension grass and threw it at the same time. Unfortunately, even though the white-haired old man used all his strength, he still could not throw the immortal ascension grass to Ningyu's side. He only managed to throw it half a meter away. Go over. Although Ningyu knew that the white-haired old man would not be so kind, the current situation did not allow him to think too much. Even though Ningyu really wanted the immortal ascension grass, he did not lose his rationality. Ningyu did not go over himself. Instead, he let a slightly plump early-stage sage go over. The plump sage dared not delay. After hearing Ningyu's words, he dashed toward the white-haired old man without stopping. Swoosh! The plump sage was very fast. However, as soon as he dashed into the spacious area, he seemed to have encountered some kind of barrier and stopped abruptly in mid-air. What the hell is going on? Ningyu's face turned extremely cold. He stared at the white-haired old man and said coldly, I hope you can give me an explanation. Otherwise, I will flatten this place even if I can't get the immortal ascension grass. I'm innocent. This has nothing to do with me. Seeing that Ningyu was enraged, the white-haired old man cried out again. It's all the fault of the founder of the Emperor Divine Palace. He set up many formations here to prevent me from leaving. Now, it has become an obstacle for you to get the immortal ascension grass. Attack. Beat him to death. Ningyu did not waste any time talking to the white-haired old man. His tone was cold as a violent, murderous intent emanated from his body. Rumble. Di Shao and the other 4 sage martialists attacked at the same time when they heard Ningyu's cold voice. At this moment, no one held back. Several terrifying spell techniques rained down on the white-haired old man from all directions. In order to teach the white-haired old man a lesson, Ningyu gave the order to kill him. No matter how much the white-haired old man begged for mercy, they could not stop attacking. The lives of Di Shao and the others were in the hands of Ningyu. They did not dare to delay whatever Ningyu told them to do. The white-haired old man knew that Ningyu was completely enraged this time. Therefore, he did not beg for mercy. Instead, he used his trump card. The white-haired old man must have a trump card to hide in the dungeon for such a long time. The white-haired old man spat out blood repeatedly just now because he did not use his trump card. Otherwise, the white-haired old man would not have spat out blood. In a spacious area, the white-haired old man spread his arms and his body spun at a terrifying speed. The white-haired old man was like a spinning top. Every time an attack landed on his body, his speed would increase. In the end, the white-haired old man's speed reached a terrifying level. It was impossible to see the white-haired old man's figure with the naked eye. Kid, don't think that I'm afraid of you. If you don't do as I say, you will never get the ascending immortal grass. The white-haired old man spun quickly and said in a sinister voice, I didn't lie to you about one thing. The founder of Emperor Divine Palace did set up many formations here. However, the formations he left behind can only stop martial artists above the Sage Realm from getting close to me. They cannot stop martial artists below the Sage Realm from getting close to me. Hearing the white-haired old man's words, Ningyu raised his eyebrows and said, You want to control me? The white-haired old man had already said this. If Ningyu still did not understand, it would be a little unreasonable. You are very smart. The white-haired old man curled his lips and said, As long as you are obedient, I promise not to kill you. Moreover, I will give you half of the ascending immortal grass. Ningyu's face was gloomy and he was struggling internally. The current situation was very clear. If he did not agree to the white-haired old man's request, he could only waste time here. Since he did not know how long the white-haired old man could last, Ningyu did not dare to gamble with the human demon's life. The human demon needed the ascending immortal grass. There was no time to waste. However, Ningyu was worried that the white-haired old man would cheat and end up empty-handed. All right, I promise you. Chapter 1741. Leave the dungeon. Whoosh. Almost as soon as Ningyu agreed, the white-haired elder and Di Shao stopped fighting. Among them, the white-haired old man waved at Ningyu and said, Come here first. Ningyu did not hesitate. He moved his feet and walked straight towards the white-haired old man. Boom! As soon as they entered the spacious area, Ningyu's expression changed slightly. Pressure. The pressure coming from all directions caused Ningyu's footsteps to falter. With every step he took, the pressure doubled. Ningyu turned his head to look at the trapped plump saint. He took a deep breath and channeled all the primordial energy in his body into his ankle, increasing his speed slightly. Not simple. When the white-haired old man saw that Ningyu did not slow down, but instead increased his speed, he nodded lightly. The white-haired elder knew very well that any other early-stage Sky Supreme would have been squashed into a meat patty by now. The fact that Ningyu could move forward under such immense pressure was enough to prove Ningyu's strength. Maybe he can really take me out. The white-haired old man looked very calm on the surface, but he was actually very nervous. Last time, he did not grasp the opportunity, causing his cultivation to drop from the late stage of the Saint Realm to the early stage of the Saint Realm in a short period of time. If he were to fail to grasp this opportunity, it wouldn't be long before his cultivation would fall to the utmost exalted level. Once his cultivation dropped to the Supreme Being realm, his life would come to an end. The white-haired old man knew the consequences, so he made up his mind this time that he must hitch a ride with Ningyu. Stop! Although he had firmly believed in Ningyu, the white-haired old man did not lose his rationality. His eyes were cold. When Ningyu was only a few steps away from him, he said in a low voice, I don't want to say anything unnecessary. If you bring me out of the dungeon, I will give you half a stalk of Ascension Immortal Grass. This might be a little difficult. Ningyu stopped according to the old man's request and spread his hands out. I'm only an initial phase Heavenly Sovereign. I'm afraid that although Ningyu did not continue, his meaning was very clear. You don't have to worry about that. In short, do you agree or not? The white-haired old man asked. I agree. Ningyu nodded. Tell me, what do you want me to do? I'll enter your body. The white-haired old man continued. In this region, an initial phase Heavenly Sovereign like you is comparable to a late phase Saint Realm cultivator. When the founder of the Emperor Palace set up the spiritual array, he did not consider Heavenly Sovereigns, which gave me an opportunity. After I enter your body, I will do my best to hide myself. All of my aura will be hidden. As long as the surrounding formations cannot detect my existence, they will naturally not attack. Ningyu frowned. The white-haired old man said it casually, but Ningyu knew that this matter was very dangerous. If anything went wrong, even he would be killed by the spiritual array. However, the situation on the human-demon side was not optimistic. Ningyu could only risk his life. Okay, I promise you. Ningyu's expression was solemn. I hope you can keep your promise and give me half of the immortal ascension grass after we leave the dungeon. Haha, I will not go back on my words. The white-haired old man laughed wildly. Now, open your mind and let me enter your body. No problem. As he spoke, Ningyu completely opened his mind. Swish! Sensing that Ningyu had opened his mind, the white-haired old man immediately turned into a shadow and entered Ningyu's body. Chi! The process of the white-haired old man entering Ningyu's body was not as easy as it seemed. It seemed that the formations left behind by the founder of Emperor God Palace had discovered the white-haired old man's intentions. As the white-haired old man was moving forward, a few formations hidden in the void attacked at the same time. Several cold lights shot towards the white-haired old man. Fortunately, the white-haired old man was well prepared. Among the several cold lights, only a few hit the white-haired old man. However, no matter how weak the white-haired old man was, he still had the cultivation of an early-stage sage. A few rays of cold light couldn't hurt him at all. Swoosh! The white-haired old man was very fast. In just a second, he entered Ningyu's body. Leave the dungeon quickly. After entering Ningyu's body, the white-haired old man's anxious words came out of his mouth. Retreat. At this moment, Ningyu did not dare to go against the white-haired old man. Hearing the white-haired old man's words, Ningyu immediately turned around and rushed out of the dungeon. Following closely behind Ningyu were Di Xiao and the other 5 sages. Initially, Fat Sage was trapped in the open area. However, as soon as the white-haired old man left, he regained his freedom and retreated from the open area. Swish! 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 Inside the dungeon, Ningyu was in front while Di Xiao and the 5 sages were behind him. As Ningyu's heart was tied to the human demon, he did not stop at all. He immediately unleashed his speed to the extreme and appeared outside the dungeon before long. As soon as he left the dungeon, Ningyu suddenly stopped. I brought you out of the dungeon. Can you give me half of the ascension herb now? Ningyu took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, Give you the ascension herb? Have you lost your mind? A discordant voice came from the white-haired old man. You better behave yourself and find me some good stuff. Otherwise, I'll turn you into an idiot. What do you want? Ningyu was so angry that his chest was heaving up and down as he said coldly. Immortal crystals, energy stones. The white-haired old man opened his mouth and listed a lot of precious items. Without a doubt, all of these items contained terrifying energy. Although he was out of the dungeon, the white-haired old man's cultivation was only at the early sage realm. In order to recover to the late sage realm as soon as possible, the white-haired old man naturally needed some good stuff. Ningyu, on the other hand, had undoubtedly become a sucker. In the white-haired old man's opinion, Ningyu's identity was not simple since he could order Di Xiao and the others with his early heavenly supreme cultivation, using the emperor to order the nobles. The white-haired old man's idea was simple. He wanted to control Ningyu and use Ningyu's resources to plunder treasures. As long as he could recover to the late sage realm, the white-haired old man could go anywhere in the world. Di Xiao, take them to Emperor God Palace and bring me all the treasures. Ningyu looked a little disappointed, but he forced himself to say, I don't want anyone else to know about this except for the few of you. Understood. Di Xiao could not wait for Ningyu to be controlled by the white-haired old man. In that case, he might be able to escape. Now that Ningyu asked him to plunder treasures, he would definitely not refuse. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, not only did Di Xiao leave, but the other 5 sages were also sent away by Ningyu. I really need the ascension herb. I hope you, after Di Xiao and the others left, Ningyu tried to calm himself down and said, "Don't talk nonsense with me." The white-haired old man interrupted Ningyu and said coldly, "Now, immediately, take me to see the human demon you mentioned." Chapter 1742. Chapter 1742. Chapter 1742 appear simultaneously. How could I dare to play tricks in front of you? Even if you gave me 10 guts, I wouldn't have that thought. Ningyu patted his chest and promised, "I finally understand now. If I follow you, stop pretending in front of me. I won't fall for it." The white-haired elder once again interrupted Ningyu's words. "I'll give you 1 minute to find the human demon. Otherwise, you'll regret it." Whoosh! Ningyu stomped on the ground and dashed forward. He had no choice but to lower his head when he was under the eaves. Moreover, Ningyu had already made preparations. He did not want to fail at this time. The distance from the dungeon to the main hall of the Emperor Divine Palace was not particularly far. Before long, Ningyu appeared in front of the main hall. "You're finally back." Zhang Chang was overjoyed to see Ningyu in the hall. Human Demon's condition was getting worse. Zhang Chang was worried that he wouldn't be able to hold on until Ningyu returned. Now that Ningyu had returned safely, Zhang Chang was relieved. Middle Stage Saint. The white-haired old man hiding in Ningyu's body was naturally aware of Zhang Chang's cultivation. To be honest, when the white-haired old man found that Zhang Chang was a warrior at the middle stage of the Sage Realm, the contempt in his heart immediately disappeared. Originally, the white-haired old man wanted to see the human demon because he guessed that the human demon must be seriously injured. Now Zhang Chang's appearance was a variable. The white-haired old man didn't want Zhang Chang to find out that he was hiding in Ningyu's body, so he guarded his mind and cut off all contact with the outside world. "Go and stand guard in front of the main hall." The white-haired old man, cutting off contact with the outside world, naturally could not be hidden from Ningyu. However, Ningyu was not in a hurry. He waved his hand at Zhang Chang and said, "No one can come in without my permission." "All right." Zhang Chang couldn't wait to leave. Hearing Ningyu's words, he stepped on the ground and left the hall in an instant. Ascension Pagoda. Seeing that Zhang Chang had left, Ningyu reached into his robe and took out the Tower of Yuzu. He exerted a little force in his palm, and the Tower of Ascension suddenly expanded. As for Ningyu, he grabbed the human demon and entered the Tower of Yuzu. On the first floor of the Yuzuan Pagoda, Ningyu laid the human demon flat on the ground and extended his perception to check on the injuries within the human demon. "Humph! What's the relationship between you and that sage middle-stage warrior?" Before Ningyu's perception could enter the human devil's body, the white-haired old man's cold snort rang out. "You'd better answer honestly. Otherwise, you know the consequences. He's Ogre's friend." Ningyu rolled his eyes and said, "There's an energy seal in the demonic human's body, and there's also the Cheelant's blood left. If he comes over, stop. The white-haired old man's eyes lit up as he said, "You're saying that the demonic human has the blood of a Cheelant?" In fact, it was no wonder that the white-haired elder would have such a reaction. What was the Cheelant's blood? It was the most precious thing in a Cheelant's body. A drop of Cheelant's blood could allow him to recover to his peak state. The white-haired elder's mind became active. If he could obtain the Cheelant's blood, he could recover to his peak state. Once he recovered to his peak state, he could even seek revenge on the founder of Divine Emperor Palace. Thinking of this, the white-haired elder said coldly, "Open your mind. I want to go out. I've said everything I need to say. Don't kill me." Ningyu appeared terrified and said anxiously, "I'll get Di Xiao and the others to find immortal crystals, energy stones, magic treasures, and pills for you." "What are you talking about? Hurry up and open your mind. Do you believe they'll take your life if you say another word?" The white-haired elder said impatiently. "All right." After being scolded by the white-haired elder, Ningyu obediently opened his mind. Whoosh! Ningyu had just relaxed his mind when the white-haired old man's figure flashed and rushed out from Ningyu's body. Seeing the white-haired elder rush out, the corner of Ningyu's mouth curled up unnaturally. "It really is the Cheelant's blood." The white-haired elder had no time to observe Ningyu. All his attention was on the human demon. The temptation of the Qilin's blood was much greater than Ningyu's. Now, while the white-haired elder's attention was on the Qilin's blood, Ningyu grabbed the human demon, tore the void, and dove in. Where do you think you're going? How could the white-haired elder let Ningyu take the human demon away? He shouted explosively, and then his figure flashed as he chased after Ningyu. Bang! The white-haired elder was so fast that he arrived at the place where Ningyu disappeared in an instant. However, when the white-haired elder tried to tear the void, he encountered a problem. No matter how hard he tried, he could not tear the void. What's going on? The white-haired elder was dumbfounded. What kind of void was so hard that even he could not tear it? Buzz! Just as the white-haired old man was feeling puzzled, the scene around him suddenly changed dramatically. The originally spacious area became extremely narrow. The white-haired elder clearly realized that he was not in the hall, but in a sealed space. Whoosh! The enraged, white-haired old man waved his hands repeatedly and suddenly blasted out several palm prints. The palm prints scattered in midair and blasted in all directions. Rumble! The palm prints exploded, but the sealed space could not be blasted open. Ningyu, hurry up and come out. The white-haired elder's eyes were cold as he said in a deep voice, "Didn't you want the immortal ascension grass? I'll count to 3. If you don't come out by then, I'll destroy the immortal ascension grass. If you dare to destroy the immortal ascension grass, I'll dare to trap you here for the rest of your life." As soon as the white-haired elder's voice fell, an indifferent voice sounded in the area. Swoosh! The white-haired elder's expression changed instantly. "Why hide in the void? Come out and see me if you can." The white-haired elder took a deep breath and shouted at the void, "If you want the immortal ascension grass, you have to have the ability first." The white-haired elder's tone was very firm. He knew that the human demon was seriously injured and needed the immortal ascension grass urgently. Without the immortal ascension grass, the human demon would most likely be finished. As long as he could drag it out for a few minutes, Ningyu would definitely beg for mercy. The white-haired elder had made up his mind that he would not hand over the immortal ascension grass no matter what. He would stay here and waste time with Ningyu to see who could outlast the other. Ningyu did not want to waste time here. As he opened the ascension tower to let Zhangchang in, he contacted the little Qilin in the Qilin ring. Zhangchang's cultivation was mid-stage sage, and the little Qilin had also recovered to early stage sage. As long as Zhangchang and the little Qilin appeared, and this was the ascension tower, Ningyu was confident that he could take down the white-haired elder. Whoosh! Whoosh! Zhangchang was the first to appear. He was originally outside the hall. After hearing Ningyu's instructions, he only took a few seconds to enter the first floor of the ascension tower. As for the little Qilin, it was already in the ascension tower, so it appeared even faster than Zhangchang. Qilin. Chapter 1743. Chapter 1743. Chapter 1743. Despair. The Qilin was an ancient divine beast. No matter where it was rare. Now that a Qilin had appeared in front of him, how could the white-haired elder not be shocked? However, being shocked was just being shocked. At this time, the white-haired old man did not dare to panic. Right now, he could only exert the strength of an early-stage sage. Facing Zhangchang, who was at the middle-stage sage, and the small Qilin, who was at the early-stage sage, was still under great pressure. If he angered Zhangchang and little Qilin, he would not be able to bear the consequences. I will give you one last chance. Hand over the immortal ascension grass. Otherwise, you should know the consequences. While the white-haired old man was still in shock, Ningyu's calm voice echoed once again. Ningyu did not care whether the white-haired old man was shocked or not. Ningyu was only concerned about one thing, and that was whether the white-haired old man would hand over the ascending immortal grass. After all, the human demon's current situation was extremely dangerous. Don't talk nonsense with me. As long as the ascending immortal grass is in my hands, I don't believe that you will dare to do anything to me. The white-haired elder's eyes were cold, and he said in a low voice, "If you really provoke me, I will destroy the immortal ascension grass immediately." As he spoke, the white-haired old man tightened his grip on the immortal ascension grass. Fortunately, the immortal ascension grass was not an ordinary medicinal herb. Otherwise, with the strength of the white-haired old man, it would have been squeezed into two halves. "Zhang Chong, what are you waiting for? Do you need me to teach you how to do it?" A cold voice resounded in the first level of the Yuzuan pagoda. Ningyu knew very well that he couldn't drag things out any longer. If he couldn't get the immortal ascension grass within 3 minutes, then the human demon would definitely be finished. Would the white-haired old man take out the immortal ascension grass after delaying him for 3 minutes? The answer was obviously no. Therefore, Ningyu decisively ordered Zhang Chong to attack the white-haired old man. Ningyu did not believe that the white-haired old man had the courage to destroy the ascending immortal grass with his own hands. After all, as long as the white-haired old man had the immortal ascension grass, his life would be guaranteed. Once he destroyed the immortal ascension grass, he would be done for. Don't get too full of yourself. If you really annoy me, Seeing Zhang Chong rushing towards him, the white-haired old man's expression changed, and he couldn't help but shout. However, before the white-haired old man could finish his sentence, he stopped abruptly and hurriedly cast a spell to counter Zhang Chong. Zhang Chong only listened to Ningyu's orders. If Ningyu asked him to attack the white-haired old man, he would definitely not hold back. Although Zhang Chong didn't know how the white-haired old man had offended Ningyu, he knew that if the white-haired old man didn't hand over the immortal ascension grass, he would be in deep trouble. At the same time, when Zhang Chong attacked the white-haired old man, he was careful. He had to do everything he could to obtain the ascension immortal grass. Zhang Chong had witnessed Ningyu's attitude towards the immortal ascension grass. Now that his life was in Ningyu's hands, if he could do something for Ningyu at this time, perhaps Ningyu's impression of him would be much better. After all, Ningyu was still hostile towards him. Rumble. Zhang Chong's cultivation was at the sage intermediate stage. When he attacked with his full strength, the white-haired old man could only defend himself. Coupled with the little Kylan's help from the side, the white-haired old man was forced to retreat. Facing Zhang Chong and the little Kylan alone, the white-haired old man felt like crying. In fact, Ningyu's guess was right. The white-haired old man really didn't dare to completely fall out with Ningyu and destroy the immortal ascension grass. Since he didn't dare to destroy the immortal ascension grass, there was only one way left for the white-haired old man. Compromise. As long as he compromised with Ningyu, Ningyu definitely wouldn't kill him. At that time, the white-haired old man could at least keep his life. However, the white-haired old man wouldn't agree to compromise no matter what. In the white-haired old man's mind, even if he wanted to compromise, he had to drag it out for tens of minutes. Thinking of this, the white-haired old man hurriedly displayed his trump card and forced Zhang Chong and the little Kylan to retreat. Waving the immortal ascension grass in his hand, the white-haired old man said coldly, "If anyone dares to take another step, I promise," swoosh. Zhang Chong didn't care what the white-haired old man was promising. Zhang Chong only knew that this was the best opportunity to obtain the immortal ascension grass. If he missed this opportunity, there wouldn't be another one. Zhang Chong gritted his teeth and immediately ignited his essence chi in surprise. He didn't hesitate to use the blood shield technique to get close to the white-haired old man. Bam! Zhang Chong's speed was very fast. Before the white-haired old man finished his sentence, he appeared in front of him. Zhang Chong clenched his right fist, and while the white-haired old man wasn't paying attention, he punched the white-haired old man's wrist. The intense pain for his wrist caused the white-haired old man's wrist to loosen, and the immortal ascension grass fell to the ground. "Get out of my way." The white-haired old man was indeed an old fox who had lived for many years. The moment the immortal ascension grass fell from his hand, he reacted and punched Zhang Chong with violent essence chi. The current situation was very clear. If Zhang Chong wanted the immortal ascension grass, he would definitely have to withstand the white-haired old man's full-force attack. If he didn't want it, he could naturally avoid it. Retreat. In a flash, Zhang Chong made a decision. Retreat. Although Ning Yu would bear a grudge against him if he retreated now, he wouldn't lose his life. If he didn't retreat, there was a high chance that he would be killed by the white-haired old man's punch. After all, the white-haired old man's full-force attack was not to be underestimated. You want to fight with me? You're still too inexperienced. Seeing Zhang Chong retreat, the white-haired old man's lips curled up and he sneered. As long as I'm here today, no one can take the immortal ascension grass away. Swoosh! As it turned out, the white-haired old man was happy a little too early. Zhang Chong chose to retreat, but the little Kylan didn't. Moreover, the white-haired old man's attention was completely attracted by Zhang Chong, which gave the little Kylan an opportunity. Almost instantly, the little Kylan appeared in front of the white-haired old man. With a flick of its tail, the little Kylan directly flung the immortal ascension grass to the other side. No! Seeing the immortal ascension grass being flung away by the little Kylan, the white-haired old man's pupil shrank and he let out a hysterical roar. The white-haired old man knew what the consequences would be if the immortal ascension grass was snatched away at this time. Once Ning Yu obtained the immortal ascension grass, what awaited him next would definitely be death. The white-haired old man clenched his fists tightly. He did not have time to care about Zhang Chong. Instead, he turned around and rushed towards the immortal ascension grass. The white-haired old man's idea was very simple. Snatch the immortal ascension grass. Crack! But how could Ning Yu possibly give the white-haired old man the chance? This was the Tower of Ascension. The void of the first level was completely under Ning Yu's control. Originally, with the immortal ascension grass on the white-haired old man, Ning Yu did not dare to use the Tower of Ascension. He was afraid that the white-haired old man would discover some clues and be driven to desperate action. But now, Ning Yu completely had no apprehensions in his heart. The void tore apart, and a palm reached out from the crack. It grabbed the immortal ascension grass and dragged it in. Seeing the immortal ascension grass disappear with his own eyes, the white-haired old man's eyes bulged, and he could not help but scream. The white-haired old man could practically predict his following fate. Chapter 1744. A gray-robed elder who. On the second floor of the Tower of Ascension, as he stared at the immortal ascension herb in his hand, Ning Yu heaved a sigh of relief. His tensed nerves relaxed a little. Ning Yu was very clear about the human demon's condition. As long as he had the immortal ascension grass, there was a high chance that he could be cured. Senior, I brought the ascending immortal grass. What should I do now? Quickly calming down, Ning Yu brought the immortal ascension grass to the human demon and asked, should I grind the immortal ascension grass for you to eat? Just swallow it. Human devil used all his strength to open his mouth and spoke in a barely audible voice. Okay, I'll give it to you now. Ning Yu hurriedly nodded and brought the whole immortal ascension grass to the human devil's mouth. 1/3. Although the human demon didn't open his eyes, his perception was still there. Through his senses, the human devil knew that Ning Yu wanted to feed him the entire ascending immortal grass. Human demon understood his own situation better than anyone else. Actually, he felt that 1/3 of the ascension immortal grass was a little too much. No problem. Ning Yu casually tore off a portion of the immortal ascension grass. Then he brought the rest of the immortal ascension grass to the human devil's mouth. The moment the immortal ascension grass entered his stomach, the human demon's expression turned ugly. Poochie. A second later, the human devil coughed up a mouthful of blood, looking even weaker than before. Senior, what should I do? Seeing that the human demon had vomited black blood, Ning Yu's heart, which had just relaxed, tensed up again. At this moment, Ning Yu even had some doubts about the effects of the immortal ascension grass. It was said that the immortal ascension grass was an extremely precious medicinal herb. Even in high-grade plains, it was a rare commodity. However, Not only did this rare commodity not improve the human demon's condition, it instead caused him to spit out a mouthful of black blood. How could Ningyu not be puzzled? Help me refine the immortal ascension grass. The human devil opened his mouth, and an extremely weak voice came out from it. Hearing this, Ningyu hastily sat cross-legged behind the human devil and placed his hands on its back. Ningyu might not be able to help much with other things, but refining the immortal ascension grass wasn't a problem for Ningyu. Chi-Chi, Ningyu mobilized all the energy in his body and gathered it in his palm. Then, it entered the human devil's body through his back. In order to help the human demon refine the immortal ascension grass as quickly as possible, Ningyu not only used his Yuan Qi, he even used his soul force without holding back. With the help of his soul power and essence energy, the immortal ascension grass in the human demon's body began to sizzle. The immortal ascension grass was an extremely precious medicinal herb. Even though Ningyu used all his strength to refine it, he still couldn't make much progress. Half an hour. In half an hour, Ningyu had only refined a little bit of the ascending immortal grass. But the bit of immortal ascension grass that Ningyu had refined was clearly of use. At the very least, the human demon's complexion was much better, and his voice wasn't as weak as before. Ningyu, I already said that a third of the immortal ascension grass was enough. Why did you still give me half? Feeling the size of the immortal ascension grass in his body, the human demon's expression turned solemn. Do you know how important the rest of the immortal ascension grass is to you? As long as you can find a few more suitable herbs, I can even help you concoct a medicinal liquid that can allow you to directly advance from the early stage to the peak of the Sky Supreme realm, or even the half-sage realm. Hearing the human demon's words, Ningyu rolled his eyes helplessly. How could Ningyu not know the importance of the immortal ascension grass? But in Ningyu's heart, the human demon was just as important. His importance far surpassed the immortal ascension grass. The immortal ascension grass was an external object. If it was gone, it could be found again. But if the human demon died, he would be gone. Moreover, the human demon had helped him a lot recently. Without the human demon, he would have died a long time ago. How could he have obtained the immortal ascension grass? Senior, don't be angry. Isn't it just a stalk of immortal ascension grass? Ningyu explained. Even the white-haired elder is under my control. When the time comes, I'll force him to tell me where he got the immortal ascension grass. Why would I worry about not being able to find it then? Forget it. Say what you want. It's your own logic anyway. The human demon took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He began to focus on refining the immortal ascension grass. Half a stalk, so be it. He could use this time to try to break the energy seal. As long as he could loosen the seal a little, the human demon's cultivation would most likely recover to the late-stage sage realm. Drip, drip. Time flew by quickly. On the second floor of the Ascension Pagoda, Ningyu and the human demon were both focused on refining the immortal ascension grass. As time passed, the human demon's condition improved with every passing minute. Ningyu and the human demon were not in a hurry. They knew very well that it would be very difficult to refine the remaining immortal ascension grass in a short period of time. The human demon was even prepared to take a long time to refine it. Of course, the condition was that the human demon's internal injuries had healed first. While Ningyu was helping the human demon refine the immortal ascension grass, a cultivator tore through the void and came out of a forest not far from the Divine Emperor Palace. I'm so angry. If I don't get my revenge, I'm not a man. The cultivator clenched his fists and looked in the direction of the Divine Emperor Palace with a venomous expression. He's Jiming. If Ningyu was here, he would definitely recognize that this cultivator was none other than He Jiming, who had left not long ago. Originally, He Jiming had wanted to complete the second task given to him by the sect alone. However, he was unwilling to do so after some thought. When he had descended from high-level plane, he had been majestic. He had brought a dozen early-stage sage cultivators with him and had even used the sect's resources to push Di Shao, the palace master of the Divine Emperor Palace, to the sage realm. However, He Jiming was no longer fit to be majestic. Describing him as a stray dog was the best way to describe him. Who's there? Suddenly, He Jiming's expression changed. He hurriedly turned around and yelled at the void. Why are you so sneaky? Get out here. I didn't expect an expert from the Divine Emperor Palace to be reduced to such a state. How sad, how lamentable. A faint laugh came from the void. Crack. Following that, the void cracked and an old man in gray clothes slowly walked out of the void. After the gray-robed old man appeared, he did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point. I want to make a deal with you. What kind of deal do you want to make? He Jiming's pupils shrank slightly when he felt the terrifying aura coming from the old man in gray. He said in a deep voice, We don't know each other. There's no deal between us. You don't know me, but I know you. The old man in gray curled his lips and said, A few days ago, you came to the Divine Emperor Palace from a high-level plane and quickly integrated the Divine Emperor Palace. Get to the point. I want to know who you are. Chapter 1745. Chapter 1745. Chapter 1745 Scapegoat. The reason why He Jiming didn't choose to attack the gray-robed elder wasn't because of the cooperation the gray-robed elder mentioned, but because of the powerful aura the gray-robed elder was emitting. Late-stage saint. The gray-robed elder's cultivation had reached the terrifying late-stage sage realm. He Jiming knew his place well when facing the gray-robed elder, who was a late-stage sage. Unless he used his final trump card, he would not be a match for the gray-robed elder. Was he going to use his last trump card now? He Jiming wasn't that stupid. He Jiming took a deep breath and stared at the old man in gray as he said in a deep voice, Even though your cultivation has reached the late saint realm, I'm not afraid of you. What's there to be afraid of? I've come here mainly to discuss the matter of cooperation with you. The gray-robed elder waved his hand. Just as he was about to say something, he saw He Jiming's furious expression and hurriedly changed his words. Let me introduce myself. My name is Enhalping, and I'm from the Clan, one of the 9 war god clans of the demon spirit realm. Enhalping of the Clan of the 9 great war gods clans? He Jiming frowned slightly, his eyes flickering. He Jiming had investigated the immortal spirit realm in the higher planes. Because the demonic spirit realm and the immortal spirit realm were neighbors, He Jiming had some understanding of the demonic spirit realm. The devil spirit realm had a total of 9 war god clans, and every war god clan was filled with experts. He Jiming was quite a character. His focus wasn't in Enhalping, but the devil spirit realms and clan, as well as the relationship between the clan and the Zhang clan. Since Enhalping came over to cooperate with him, it was definitely not a small matter. Maybe it was inextricably linked to Zhang Chong. My purpose for coming here is very simple. Seeing He Jiming frown, Enhalping knew that things could be expected. He said, Let's attack the Emperor Palace together. I'll help you gain control of the Emperor Palace, and you help me kill Zhang Chong and Zhang Kejuan. Boom! When Enhalping's voice fell, He Jiming's heart immediately stirred up some waves. Although He Jiming had long guessed that Enhalping's arrival was related to Zhang Chong, he was still very excited when Enhalping admitted it. There was no other reason. With the help of Enhalping, a warrior at the late stage of the Saint Realm, it was not impossible to recapture the Emperor Palace. You're a late-stage sage. You can wait until Zhang Chong and Zhang Kejuan come out of the Emperor Palace. Forcibly suppressing the excitement in his heart, He Jiming said solemnly, There is no free lunch in the world, and He Jiming was not a fool. Under normal circumstances, it would be easy for Qianhao, a warrior at the late stage of Sage Realm, to kill Zhang Chong and Zhang Kejuan. There is absolutely no need to cooperate with him. Since Enhalping cooperated with him, it meant that he had value, or that there was something that Enhalping was interested in. Equivalent exchange was the basis of cooperation. If the two sides couldn't make an equivalent exchange, then the cooperation was destined to not last long. Enhalping's expression was solemn. He shook his head and said, It's not that I haven't tried what you said, but the effect is minimal. Zhang Chong is a very scheming person. I attacked him once before and it was very unpleasant. It has aroused his suspicion, so At this point, Anhaoping paused for a moment and did not continue. Even if Anhaoping did not say it, Jiming had roughly figured out the situation. Anhaoping was afraid of being discovered by Zhang Chong, so he did not dare to make a move. He wanted to use Jiming to kill Zhang Chong and Zhang Kejuan. If it had been in the past, Jiming would have been able to react. After all, Anhaoping's explanation was full of loopholes. But now, Jiming was blinded by hatred. He wanted to go back to the Emperor Palace and kill Ningyu, which led to Anhaoping taking advantage of the loophole. This matter can't be rushed. I'll go and challenge them first. You hide in the void and don't do anything. Just follow my instructions. A ruthless look flashed across Anhaoping's eyes, and then he said, "You're seriously injured now. You'd better recuperate for 3 or 4 hours. We'll set off after you've recovered to your peak state." "What are you afraid of?" "I'm fine." Jiming patted his chest and said coldly, "Let's set off now. I'm afraid that human demon will recover if we're a few steps late." In fact, not long after leaving the Emperor Palace, Jiming had figured it out. Human demon could raise his cultivation to the peak late saint realm in such a short time. He must have taken some forbidden elixir. Generally speaking, those who took forbidden elixirs would end up in a miserable state. Backlash. Once the effect of the elixir wore off, the person who took it would definitely suffer a backlash. Previously, although Jiming knew that human demon would suffer a backlash, he didn't dare to go back. After all, he wasn't absolutely sure. But now, with the addition of Anhaoping, a late Saint Realm warrior, Jiming felt a lot more confident. Now that he was confident, Jiming wanted to go back as soon as possible. "Ha! No wonder you're from a higher plane. Since you're fine, let's set off." Anhaoping laughed. Then, he stomped on the ground and flew towards the Emperor Divine Palace. Humph! Seeing that Anhaoping had left, Jiming didn't stay for long. He also moved and disappeared behind Anhaoping. Buzz! Not long after Anhaoping and Jiming disappeared, 2 figures appeared in the void. These 2 martial artists looked to be in their 40s or 50s from the outside. They were shrouded in a layer of faint white mist, making it impossible to see their cultivation. Anhaoping's move is really good. Looking in the direction where Anhaoping and Jiming disappeared, one of the middle-aged men couldn't help but nod. The middle-aged man who spoke had a cold expression, giving off a feeling that strangers shouldn't get close to him. As for the other middle-aged man, he said with a smile, "Anhaoping is very calm. I'm afraid the clan sent him out because of this. With Anhaoping taking action, I reckon that the Emperor Palace will be breached soon. We should also prepare early." The cold-looking man's expression was indifferent. No one could tell what he was thinking. "Yes, we have to prepare, but not now." Smiling Tiger raised the corner of his mouth and said, "Anhaoping is a high-ranking member of the clan. If we can make him suffer a little in the future," our 2 clans, Smiling Tiger, did not continue, but the meaning behind his words was self-evident. Among the 9 war god clans in the demon spirit realm, each clan had mutual interests and conflicts. To any clan, the loss of even a single Sage Realm warrior was a huge matter. This time, the 3 clans had joined hands to plot against the Zhang clan. Moreover, there was a war god candidate from the Zhang clan. If they succeeded, the benefits would be great. Of course, there were benefits and disadvantages. The disadvantage was that the Zhang clan would find out and choose to fight to the death. Obviously, Smiling Tiger had thought of this. However, Smiling Tiger wasn't particularly worried because he was already prepared. Scapegoat. Chapter 1746. Chapter 1746. Chapter 1746. Hope rises, of course. Anhaoping had no idea what Smiling Tiger and the Stern Man were thinking. At this moment, Anhaoping and Jiming had already arrived at Emperor City. The first thing Jiming did was to find Sun Deshan. Jiming, Zhang Chong, and 5 early-stage sage warriors came to find Sun Deshan and the human demon. The human demon and Ningyu had lured them away, so Jiming couldn't find them. However, Jiming couldn't even find Sun Deshan. In fact, it wasn't difficult for Jiming to find Sun Deshan with his cultivation. The key was that He Jiming's main targets were the human demon and Ningyu, which gave Sun Deshan a chance to escape. Now he was back, and he brought in Haoping, who was a late-stage sage, with him. In addition, He Jiming wanted to test in Haoping's strength, so he asked in Haoping to look for Sun Deshan. "Don't worry, give me 10 minutes. The little scheme in He Jiming's heart, and Haoping was naturally crystal clear. However, he wouldn't point it out even if he knew. He could take advantage of this opportunity to show He Jiming his strength and lay a good foundation for his future actions. Swoosh! With a swift movement, and Haoping blended into the void and disappeared without a trace. He Jiming didn't doubt that an Haoping could find Sun Deshan. If an Haoping couldn't even find Sun Deshan, there would be no need for them to cooperate. What He Jiming needed to do now was to find the sages of the Zhang family. On the way to Emperor's City, He Jiming casually mentioned that there were a few sages of the Zhang family in Emperor's City and hinted that he would help an Haoping get rid of them. And Haoping had no reason to refuse He Jiming's offer. It might take some time to find Sun Deshan, but it wouldn't take He Jiming much time to find a few early-stage sage warriors. 5 minutes. In just 5 minutes, He Jiming found 4 early-stage sage warriors hiding in the surroundings. Without a doubt, these 4 hidden sages were all from the Zhang family of the demonic spirit realm. He Jiming didn't leave the Zhang family any face. He punched 4 times in a row. Bang, 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 bang. Every punch landed on the heart of a saint martial artist. For punches, for crisp sounds. For warriors at the early stage of the sage realm. The result was predictable. No shinobi could survive the wrath of He Jiming. In addition to the 5 minutes he had spent looking for people, He Jiming had used a total of 7 minutes to kill 4 initial stage Sage Realm warriors. Who? After killing 4 early stage Sage Realm warriors, He Jiming slowly exhaled a mouthful of foul air. To be honest, He Jiming was under a lot of pressure after killing 4 Sage early stage warriors at once. Fortunately, these 4 Saint martial artists were rather stupid and did not resist with all their might. Otherwise, if the 4 of them joined forces, it would be enough to make He Jiming suffer. What is an Haoping doing here? Casually kicking the 4 sages to the side, He Jiming frowned slightly and muttered, "Demonic spirit realm and family, demonic spirit realm Zhang family." The more He Jiming thought about it, the more he felt that things were not that simple. He Jiming wouldn't think too much when he was angry. Now that he had enough time and his anger had calmed down, he definitely had to think about it more. Bang! At this moment, the void suddenly split open, and a figure flew out from the void. The sound of a body hitting the ground was heard. Great, as expected of an expert from the demonic spirit realm and family. Looking at Sun Deshan, who was half kneeling in front of him, He Jiming nodded at an Haoping and said, "Wait for me for a moment. After I get rid of this traitor, I'll immediately kill my way to the Divine Emperor Palace." Although he didn't quite agree with He Jiming's approach, thinking that he still had to ask He Jiming for help, and Haoping had no choice but to say, "Don't take too long. I'm afraid that things will change if we delay." "No problem, leave it to me." He Jiming patted his chest and guaranteed. Obviously, he didn't take human demon, Ning Yu, and the others seriously. And Haoping frowned slightly and opened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but he shook his head gently. "I hope I'm wrong. Logically speaking, He Jiming shouldn't have noticed anything at this time." On the other side, He Jiming stepped on Sun Deshan's chest and said coldly, "I've treated you well. Why did you betray me? I only have myself to blame for ending up like this. If you want to kill me or torture me, do as you please." Sun Deshan braced himself and said, "Do you really think I don't dare to kill you?" He Jiming said in a deep voice, "Even if you don't kill me, I'll kill myself soon." Sun Deshan gritted his teeth and said, "I'm already under human demon's control. As long as human demon wills it, I'll die without a burial place. In addition, the control of my body doesn't belong to me. It belongs to human demon. You can say that if human demon wants me to go west, I'll definitely not go east. If human demon wants me to die at midnight, I'll definitely not live past midnight." Hearing Sun Deshan's words, He Jiming frowned and vaguely felt that something was wrong. If things were really like what Sun Deshan said, didn't that mean the human demon also knew what Sun Deshan was saying now? He Jiming wasn't particularly worried that human demon knew what Sun Deshan said. The only thing He Jiming was worried about was that human demon knew about Enhalping's existence. Enhalping was their biggest weapon, the key to whether they could regain control of Emperor Divine Palace and kill human demon. If Enhalping was exposed, it meant that their plan this time would fall short of success. The more He Jiming thought about it, the uglier his face became. In the end, He Jiming even had the urge to slap Sun Deshan to death. However, He Jiming restrained his inner thoughts. He took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Since human demon has control of your body, then let me ask you, do you know about human demon's current situation?" Human demon's current situation? Sun Deshan frowned, not knowing what He Jiming meant. Seeing Sun Deshan's frown, He Jiming said coldly, "In other words, can you contact human demon?" "I'll try." Sun Deshan gritted his teeth, then closed his eyes and began to contact human demon. What? As time passed, Sun Deshan's entire person was shocked to the extreme. What's going on? Sun Deshan's action made He Jiming's heart skip a beat. Sun Deshan opened his mouth slightly and said, "My control of body seems to have nothing to do with human demon." Nothing to do with human demon? He Jiming was overjoyed. If Sun Deshan had nothing to do with human demon, it meant that Enhalping would not be exposed. If Enhalping was not exposed, He Jiming was confident that he could break into Emperor Divine Palace and kill human demon. Well, although I have nothing to do with human demon, I seem to have some kind of connection with Ningyu. Chapter 1747. Chapter 1747. Chapter 1747. To do something identical? Hearing Sun Deshan's words, He Jiming was slightly stunned at first, and then his expression changed. He said in a low voice, "You mean to say that you're now under Ningyu's control?" "That's possible." Sun Deshan looked up at the angry He Jiming and whispered, "But I can be sure that Ningyu doesn't know what happened here." Sun Deshan was no fool. Ever since he knew that human demon had transferred control of him to Ningyu, his mind became active. Sun Deshan never thought of begging He Jiming for mercy when he was under the control of the human demon. Sun Deshan knew very well that even if he begged for mercy, He Jiming would not let him go. He would definitely kill him in the end. But things were different now. The connection between him and Ningyu was much weaker than it had been with the human devil. Sun Deshan was certain that Ningyu was busy with something, or that he was under some kind of interference or restraint and did not have the time to care about him. In this case, as long as He Jiming and the late-stage Saint martial artist next to him were willing to help, there was a great possibility that he could escape from Ningyu's control. The more Sun Deshan thought about it, the more likely it was. Taking a deep breath, Sun Deshan said to He Jiming, "Right now, Ningyu doesn't know what happened here, but if it drags on, I'm afraid something will happen." "Do you think?" Sun Deshan didn't continue. Even if Sun Deshan didn't say it, He Jiming's heart was clear. After thinking about it, He Jiming said, "Relax your mind. Enhalping, and I will examine you first." "Thank you, Elder." Sun Deshan's face lit up, and he hurriedly relaxed his mind. "Enhalping, do me a favor," He Jiming said to Enhalping. Then, his perception surged out and entered Sun Deshan's body. Seeing He Jiming's actions, Enhalping rolled his eyes. Enhalping didn't agree with He Jiming's actions at all. If this happened to Enhalping would definitely kill Sun Deshan. He would never leave an uncertain factor like Sun Deshan alive. However, Enhalping still had some self-awareness. He needed He Jiming's help, and Sun Deshan was very important to He Jiming. It was unwise to offend He Jiming at this time. Xiao, with a thought, Enhalping released his perception power and quickly entered Sun Deshan's body. Not good. Just as Enhalping and He Jiming's perception entered Sun Deshan's body, Ningyu's expression changed drastically. Sun Deshan's body was suddenly invaded by two powerful senses, which naturally couldn't be hidden from Ningyu. Although Ningyu was busy helping the human devil refine the immortal ascension grass, so Sun Deshun was not very clear about what was going on. However, how could Sun Deshun's body be hidden from Ningyu when two powerful senses suddenly entered his body? Puchi. However, just as Ningyu was about to respond, he felt a sweetness in his throat and suddenly spat out a mouthful of dark red blood. What's going on? After this period of rest, although there was still a lot of the immortal ascension grass left, the human devil's mental state had improved a lot. Seeing Ningyu spit out blood, the human devil immediately realized the severity of the problem. He hurriedly asked, "Did you consume too much energy refining the immortal ascension grass? If that's the case, you should go rest first. I'll handle the rest myself. It has nothing to do with the immortal ascension grass. My body is very good. Even if I refine it for a few more hours, there won't be a problem." Ningyu shook his head and said solemnly, "I've lost contact with Sun Deshun." Lost contact with Sun Deshun? Even though the human devil had guessed that things weren't that simple, his expression still turned ugly when he heard Ningyu's words. Sun Deshun was originally under his control, but not long ago, he had transferred control of Sun Deshun and the rest to Ningyu. From start to finish, only 2 hours had passed, and Sun Deshun had lost contact with Ningyu. A slap in the face. This matter wasn't just a slap to Ningyu's face. It was a slap to the human devil's face. The human devil's temper had always been violent. At this moment, his expression became even more ferocious. He said angrily, "Is it he Jiming? One of them is he Jiming, but I'm not too sure about the other." Ningyu frowned slightly. The two senses that helped Sun Deshun, one is a mid-stage sage, and the other is a late-stage sage. The mid-stage sage is definitely he Jiming. As for the late-stage sage, I still don't know who it is. If it was just he Jiming alone, it would be fine. But now, there was a late-stage sage whose strength was above he Jiming's. How could Ningyu not be shocked? While Ningyu was shocked, so was the human devil. However, at the same time, the human devil considered another level. The other half of the immortal ascension grass hadn't been completely refined yet. At this time, the strength that the human devil could display was at most that of an early-stage sage. Even he Jiming couldn't defeat an early-stage sage human devil, let alone a late-stage sage. Contact Di Xiao and ask him to find a way to activate the palace protection formation. Taking a deep breath, the human devil said, "In addition, ask Zhang Chong and Little Kylan to guard the palace protection formation. The situation may be more complicated." Ningyu shook his head again and said, "The palace protection formation of Emperor Palace can't be activated for a second time in a short time. Zhang Chong and Little Kylan are definitely no match for He Jiming and the other late-stage sage. Even so, we can't just sit here and wait for death. If it doesn't work, I'll take a few of them down with me, even if I have to risk the energy seal and the backlash." The human devil showed a determined look. Whether it was Zhang Chong or Little Kylan, their strength was not particularly strong. It might be no problem for them to fight against He Jiming, who was at the mid-stage sage, but they would definitely lose against a late-stage sage. This was not a child's game. If they failed, they would lose their lives. The human devil was ready. Instead of letting Zhang Chong and Little Kylan die in vain, he might as well risk his life again. At most, he would just die. How about this? I'll ask Di Xiao to take the remaining sages to Emperor City to stall He Jiming, while you and I go to the first level of the Tower of Transcendence. Ningyu did not wait for the human devil to stop him and immediately gave the order. Since Di Xiao and the others were under Ningyu's control, Ningyu passed down the order almost instantly. Whoosh! Di Xiao did not dare to delay and hurriedly led all the sages to Emperor City to stop He Jiming. As for Ningyu and the human devil, they went to the first level of the Tower of Transcendence. How dare you come back? On the first level of the Tower of Transcendence, the white-haired old man was fighting with Zhang Chong and Little Kylan when he suddenly saw Ningyu and the human devil tearing through the void. His face immediately became ferocious, and he said fiercely, "You stole my ascending immortal grass. I want you to pay with your lives." Pay with my life? If you want the ascending immortal grass, I can give it back to you. Chapter 1748. Chapter 1748. An absolute trump card. What tricks do you want to play this time? The white-haired old man looked at Ning Yu vigilantly with an ugly expression. At this moment, the white-haired old man finally figured out his current situation. A closed space. Not only was he trapped in a closed space, but Zhang Chong and little Kylan were also eyeing him. Zhang Chong was at the middle stage of the Sage Realm, and little Kylan was at the early stage of the Sage Realm. With little Kylan and Zhang Chong around, the white-haired old man knew that it would be difficult for him to escape by himself. Since he could not escape, the white-haired old man's attitude towards Ning Yu was naturally very cold. I don't want to play tricks. I just want you to help me deal with a late-stage Sage Realm warrior. Ning Yu shrugged and said, as long as you can help me hold off a late-stage Sage Realm warrior for 3 hours, I can swear to heaven that I will return the remaining half of the Ascension Immortal Grass to you. Puff! Hearing Ning Yu's words, the white-haired old man's eyeballs almost popped out. The white-haired old man was very self-aware. He could only exert the combat power of an early-stage Sage Realm warrior. It would be very difficult for him to fight against Zhang Chong, who is at the middle stage Sage Realm, let alone a late-stage Sage Realm warrior. Moreover, the white-haired old man knew better than anyone else. Zhang Chong and little Kylan did not use their full strength. If Zhang Chong and little Kylan used their full strength, he would definitely not be able to hold on for long. I know you have that ability. Ning Yu completely saw the white-haired old man's reaction. However, Ning Yu acted as if he did not see it and continued to say, it's not difficult for you to hold off a late-stage Sage Realm warrior for 3 hours. Not difficult. The white-haired old man opened his mouth slightly and said angrily, when I was at my peak, I was naturally not afraid of a late-stage Sage Realm warrior. But now, I can only exert the strength of an early-stage Sage Realm warrior. You want me to hold off a late-stage Sage Realm warrior for 3 hours? You might as well just kill me. As you wish. Ning Yu's expression became gloomy. He glanced at Zhang Chong and little Kylan and made a killing gesture with his right hand on his neck. Whoosh! Whoosh! Zhang Chong and little Qilin were still feeling depressed about not being able to use their full strength. At this moment, when they saw Ning Yu's actions, the resentment they had suppressed in their bodies burst out in one go. 2 figures charged at the white-haired old man from 2 different directions. Xiao! Meanwhile, the human devil by Ning Yu's side also swept out, cooperating with Zhang Chong and little Qilin. Wait! The white-haired old man's expression immediately changed when he saw 3 experts charging at him. He hurriedly said, we can discuss this. I am willing, bang. Bang. Before the white-haired old man could finish his sentence, Zhang Chong and the little Qilin's attacks landed on his chest. 2 crisp sounds rang out consecutively. The white-haired old man was like a kite with a broken string as he fell backward. Before Ning Yu and the human devil arrived, the white-haired old man had to face Zhang Chong and the little Kylan alone. His body had already suffered heavy injuries. Now that Zhang Chong and little Qilin attacked with all their might, he didn't even have the leeway to parry. The white-haired old man's body hit the ground heavily. He spat out a mouthful of dark red blood on the spot. His face became a little pale. I am willing to help you deal with the advanced Sage Realm martial artist. Although he spat out blood, although his face was pale, although Zhang Chong and the little Kylan attacked him again, the white-haired old man did not care at all. Instead, he said crazily, as long as you don't kill me, I can deal with the advanced Sage Realm martial artist. Not to mention 3 hours. Even if it's 10 hours, I can do it. Ning Yu raised his right hand slightly, signaling Zhang Chong and the little Kylan to stop first. Looking straight at the white-haired old man, Ning Yu said in a deep voice, I'll say the ugly words first. If you can't resist the advanced Sage Realm martial artist for 3 hours, don't blame me for being ruthless. Don't worry, I promise it won't be a problem. The white-haired old man showed a resolute look. He had to lower his head when he was under the eaves. The white-haired old man was very clear about his current situation. If he did not agree to Ning Yu's request, he would definitely be killed by Zhang Chong and the little Kylan. If he agreed to Ning Yu's request, although he would lose a lot, at least he could keep his life. As for resisting the advanced sage realm martial artist for 3 hours, the white-haired old man was actually not absolutely sure. In other words, even if he was sure, the white-haired old man was not willing to do it, because the white-haired old man had a trump card. Once he used it, he could burst out a terrifying combat power in a short period of time. Of course, a trump card had its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that it could burst out a terrifying combat power, which was the best way to protect himself. However, the disadvantage was that all the tendons and vessels in his body would be broken. In serious cases, he might even lose his cultivation. If Ning Yu really agreed to give the Ascension Immortal Grass to the white-haired old man, the white-haired old man would naturally dare to use his trump card. Because the Ascension Immortal Grass could cure all the problems caused by the white-haired old man using his trump card. However, at the same time, the white-haired old man was very conflicted. Should he use his trump card? Previously, when the Ascension Immortal Grass was with the white-haired old man, he did not use his trump card. Firstly, it took time to use his trump card. Secondly, it was because Zhang Chong had caught him off guard and directly snatched the Ascension Immortal Grass from his hands. Without the Ascension Immortal Grass, the white-haired old man did not dare to use his trump card. Open your mind and let the human demon control you. Ning Yu did not care about what the white-haired old man was thinking. His eyes were cold, and he said in a deep voice, "What?" The white-haired old man's eyes widened. He could not believe his ears. He could still accept using his trump card. This was because he had a plan in mind. After using his trump card, his cultivation could instantly reach the peak of the Advanced Sage Realm. As long as his cultivation reached the peak of the Advanced Sage Realm, he was absolutely sure that he could instantly control Ning Yu and the human demon. He could even control Zhang Chong. If he controlled Ning Yu and the human demon, he would not have to worry about the Ascension Immortal Grass. However, Ning Yu's words caused his face to instantly turn gloomy. Once he was controlled by the human demon, what was the point of using his trump card? He was not going to do anything for someone else for no reason. I can help you, but if you want me to open my mind and let you control me, no way. The white-haired old man's face was terrifyingly gloomy. He said angrily, "At most, we will go our separate ways. We will all die together." Go our separate ways? What right do you have to negotiate with me? Ning Yu sneered. A cold voice came from his mouth. He's just a late-stage sage. As long as we hide in the Tower of Ascension and don't go out, when the human demon finishes refining half of the Ascension Immortal Grass, his cultivation will definitely recover to its peak. He might even be able to reach the late-stage sage realm. Chapter 1749. Who's scheming against him? As he spoke, Ning Yu waved his hand at Zhang Chong and the little Qilin. Whoosh! Whoosh! The moment Ning Yu's voice fell, Zhang Chong and the little Qilin charged the white-haired old man at an astonishing speed. Zhang Chong and the little Qilin used their full strength in this attack without holding back. Since the white-haired old man was unwilling to compromise, there was no need to keep him alive. Rather than leaving the white-haired old man alive, it would be better to kill him now to avoid any unforeseen events in the future. Fight! Seeing Zhang Chong and the little Qilin closing in on him, the white-haired old man gritted his teeth and decided to fight for his life. If Ning Yu had other requests, the white-haired old man would definitely consider it. However, the white-haired old man would never agree to let go of his mind and allow himself to be controlled by the human demon. Rumble. A great battle broke out. Under the powerful attacks of Zhang Chong and the little Qilin, the white-haired old man was unquestionably forced to retreat. However, the white-haired old man was not to be trifled with. Sometimes, under the premise of knowing that there was no chance of survival, humans could erupt with extremely shocking combat strength. The white-haired old man was now forced into a corner and had no choice but to go all out. This is not the way to go on. Ning Yu stared at the battlefield and said solemnly, "I've completely lost contact with Sun Deshan. He Jiming must have brought that late-stage sage over." How about this? Let Zhang Chong and the little Qilin help me, and I'll forcefully control the white-haired old man. After a moment's thought, the human demon seemed to have made a great decision. As long as I can forcefully control him, I won't have to worry about him not helping. Don't be rash. Ningyu hurriedly waved his hands. If there's no other way, we can temporarily hide in the Tower of Yuzuan and wait for you to recover to your peak condition before leaving. That may be the case, but I'm worried that the Tower of Yuzuan... The human demon did not finish his sentence, but his meaning was self-evident. As a cultivator from a higher plane whose cultivation had surpassed the sage realm at its peak, the human demon did not believe that the Transcendence Pagoda could withstand the attack of a late-stage sage. Although he didn't believe it, human demon wouldn't say it in front of Ningyu. Don't worry, the Transcendence Pagoda will definitely be fine. How could Ningyu not know what the human demon meant? To be honest, even Ningyu wasn't sure if the Transcendence Pagoda could withstand the attack of a late-stage sage. But now, Ningyu had to take a gamble. This was because Ningyu knew very well that the human demon's current state did not allow him to forcibly control the white-haired old man. Once it was forcefully controlled, the consequences would be terrifying. At the very least, they would be severely injured and unable to recover. Heavy cases. They might even die on the spot. The human demon opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but stopped abruptly. Pucci. On the other side, the white-haired old man suddenly spat out a mouthful of dark red blood. His face became extremely pale. Of course, the white-haired old man's pale face wasn't because of human demon silence. The human demon had kept his mouth shut because the white-haired old man had made a compromise. I surrender. When the white-haired old man said these words, the entire first level of the Transcendence Pagoda fell silent. Zhang Chong and the little Qilin had originally planned to kill the white-haired old man, but now that he had chosen to surrender, they naturally wouldn't continue attacking. Instead, they turned their gazes to Ningyu, wanting to hear what Ningyu had to say. If Ningyu wanted them to kill the white-haired old man, they would definitely continue attacking. Relax your mind. Frowning slightly, although Ningyu didn't know what the white-haired old man was planning, Ningyu still said, as long as you're willing to let human demon control you, what I said before still stands. I can relax my mind, but I won't let human demon control me. The white-haired old man took a deep breath and spoke in a slightly dispirited tone. Ningyu raised his brow and raised his right hand, ready to swing it down. Seeing Ningyu's action, the white-haired old man's face paled, and he hurriedly said, I don't trust human demon's character. I only trust you. Ningyu's eyes widened in disbelief. Don't trust human demon's character? It's probably sure Leji. However, this thought only lingered in Ningyu's mind for a second before Ningyu tossed it to the back of his mind. The white-haired old man couldn't be sure Leji. Since that was the case, there was only one reason why the white-haired old man didn't want to let human demon control him. He had a guilty conscience. Ningyu's face couldn't help turning grave. He was only an initial phase Sky Supreme. If the white-haired old man schemed against him, the consequences would be unimaginable. Senior, I'll have to trouble you later. Ningyu first sent a voice transmission to the human demon before turning to the white-haired old man. I can relax my mind, but don't you dare play any tricks. How would I dare to play any tricks? The white-haired old man immediately waved his hand. I'll relax my mind now. You can control me at any time. Then, the white-haired old man closed his eyes and acted as if he was waiting to be slaughtered. Ningyu's eyes turned cold. A drop of blood flew out from his heart and flew towards the white-haired old man at a shocking speed. Sizzle, sizzle. The speed of the blood was so fast that sizzling sound could be heard as it rubbed against the air. The white-haired old man's face changed when he sensed that it wasn't Ningyu's soul force flying towards him, but a drop of blood. But at this moment, the white-haired old man wouldn't resist, because the white-haired old man knew very well that so long as he dared to resist, then Ningyu would definitely kill him. Twice, no more thrice. Ningyu could tolerate him going back on his word twice, but he definitely wouldn't tolerate him going back on his word a third time. Therefore, the white-haired old man chose to endure. Whoosh! A drop of blood, or more accurately, a drop of dark gold blood, entered the white-haired old man's body through his back and forced its way into his sea of consciousness. Rumble! A drop of dark gold blood suddenly appeared in his sea of consciousness. The white-haired old man's head rumbled as he felt unbearable pain. This kind of pain, there are psychological, there are physical. The white-haired old man thought that his plan was foolproof, but who would have thought that he would still be tricked by Ningyu? The blood of the war god's physique. The white-haired old man wasn't a hothead. He understood the blood of the war god's physique better than anyone else. I definitely can't compromise. The white-haired old man took a deep breath and decided to ignore the blood of the war god's physique in his sea of consciousness. As the saying went, where there's life, there's hope. The white-haired old man had to be extremely careful when dealing with the blood of the war god's physique. He had to find a foolproof plan. Otherwise, if he acted rashly, there was a high possibility that he would be seriously injured, even if he regained control of his body. On Ningyu's side, there was Zhang Chong, who was in the middle stage of the sage, the small Kylan, and the human demon, who were in the early stage of the sage. Chapter 1750. Blood Witch's Saberbang. At the same time, outside the main gate of Emperor Palace, He Jiming casually pushed a martial artist of the early stage of the sage realm several meters back. He stared at the martial artist in front of him and said coldly, "Di Xiao, I'll give you one last chance." Hearing He Jiming's words, Di Xiao's face darkened. To be honest, Di Xiao really wanted to rely on He Jiming. However, he did not lose his mind. Di Xiao knew better than anyone else that if he dared to rely on He Jiming, Ningyu would kill him immediately. He was different from Sun Deshan. Sun Deshan was able to escape Ningyu's control because of He Jiming and Haoping's help. Secondly, Ningyu was helping Human Demon to refine the ascending immortal grass. The right time, place, and people were all necessary. Di Xiao glanced at the martial artist of the early stage of the sage realm behind him and said seriously, "Elder He, it's not that I don't want to rely on you, but I have no other choice." As he spoke, Di Xiao took a few steps back. He then waved his hand and said, "Activate the formation. No one is allowed to enter without my permission." Whoosh! As Di Xiao's voice fell, a terrifying formation rose from the ground in front of the main gate of Emperor Palace. Damn it! Looking at the huge formation in front of him, He Jiming's face darkened. At this moment, He Jiming regretted not taking Di Xiao down forcefully. If he had not wanted to save Di Xiao, the others would not have had time to set up the formation. As the palace master of Emperor Divine Palace, it was not unusual for Di Xiao to be able to control a terrifying formation. After all the resources of Emperor Palace were concentrated on Di Xiao. And Haoping, I need your help. Taking a deep breath, He Jiming pointed at the formation in front of him and said, "This formation is the last barrier of Emperor Palace. If you want to enter Emperor Palace, you have to break it. As you wish." And Haoping did not hesitate. He reached into his robes and took out a palm-sized scroll. Whoosh! He exerted some force in his palm, and the scroll flew toward the formation. Although the scroll was only the size of a palm, it was constantly expanding as it flew towards the array formation. Rumble! When the scroll grew to a certain size, it exploded with a loud bang. The aftermath of the explosion of the scroll continued to spread in all directions with the formation as the center. Kacha! Kacha! The powerful shockwave caused the surrounding buildings to collapse on the spot. In the face of such a horrifying shockwave, the formation that Di Xiao and the others had spent a long time setting up only lasted for 3 to 4 minutes before it collapsed. Xiao xiao xiao. As soon as the formation collapsed, He Jiming and Haoping and Sun Deshan dashed into the Emperor God Palace. Among them, He Jiming's target was Di Xiao. He only wanted to capture and seal Di Xiao. Sun Deshan's target was Di Tianming. Sun Deshan was someone who held grudges. Not long ago, he and Di Tianming had chased after the human devil, wanting to probe the depths of the human devil. Who would have thought that he would be controlled by the human demon, while Di Tianming was unharmed? With Sun Deshun's vengeful personality, he would definitely not let Di Tianming off this time. As for Haoping's goal, it was very general. As long as He Jiming and Sun Deshun didn't care about martial artists, he would accept them all. After all, and Haoping was a late-stage sage. Under his powerful attacks, none of the early-stage sage martial artists around him could withstand 3 moves from him. Almost every early-stage sage martial artist was killed within 3 moves. What a great harvest! Feeling the gourd gradually turning blood-red in his sleeve, and Haoping couldn't help but smile sinisterly. The Celestial Spirit region is indeed a good place. The Emperor God Palace is just a force under the Sky Demon region that isn't particularly powerful, but can already establish contact with high-level planes and send so many sage martial artists here. This shows that the other sects must have also established contact with high-level planes. This trip to the Demon Spirit region, I can kill Zhang Kejuan and Zhang Chong, disrupt the Zhang family's deployment, and let my gore mature. This is really a worthwhile trip. Although he thought about it, and Haoping didn't hold back. Instead, he increased the strength of his attacks. 5 minutes, from start to finish, and Haoping spent a total of 5 minutes killing all the early-stage sage martial artists that Di Xiao had brought. Of course, except for Di Tianming. At this moment, Di Tianming wasn't in a good situation. Or rather, he was in a very bad situation. Under Sun Deshun's strong attacks, Di Tianming was forced to retreat step by step. There were a few times when he was hit so hard that he spat out a mouthful of blood. Based on normal strength, Di Tianming and Sun Deshun were almost on par. However, because of He Jiming and in Haoping's presence, Di Tianming didn't use his full strength. Di Tianming was afraid that He Jiming and in Haoping would suddenly launch a sneak attack on him, so he naturally didn't dare to use his full strength. Originally, Di Tianming and Sun Deshun were almost on par. Now that Di Tianming didn't use his full strength and Sun Deshun used his full strength, the result was obvious. Bang! 3 minutes later, Sun Deshun punched Di Tianming's head. A crisp sound rang out as Di Tianming fell backwards. Crack! Crack! Di Tianming's body hit the ground heavily. All the bones in Di Tianming's body were basically broken. Even you have this day? Sun Deshun stared at Di Tianming and said coldly, "This day next year will be the anniversary of your death." With that, Sun Deshun raised his right leg and stomped down on Di Tianming's head. Sun Deshun's kick was very powerful. If Di Tianming's head was unfortunately stepped on, he would definitely die on the spot. Hold it! However, at this critical moment, an indifferent voice rang in Sun Deshun's ears. Hearing this, Sun Deshun's expression changed, and his right leg quickly floated in midair. Turning back to looking at Haoping, Sun Deshun asked, "I don't know, don't ask if you don't know." And Haoping waved his hand and interrupted Sun Deshun. He said indifferently, "Step back for now. I still have use for Di Tianming." As he spoke, and Haoping moved his feet and came in front of Di Tianming, staring into Di Tianming's eyes, and Haoping said, "I'll give you a chance to live, but the condition is that you have to tell me everything about the Zhang family." About the Zhang family? Di Tianming was a little puzzled. In Di Tianming's heart, and Haoping came with He Jiming, so he was definitely an expert from a higher dimension. Since he was an expert from a higher dimension, why would he ask about the Zhang family? And Haoping could clearly see the confusion in Di Tianming's eyes. Chapter 1751. Forcible Seal, Blood Witch Massacre Knife. As soon as an Haoping finished speaking, Di Tianming's expression changed drastically. The Blood Witch Massacre Knife was the Zhang family's treasure. Even among the 9 great families of the demon spirit realm, it could be ranked in the top 3. It was even comparable to the number 1 Dharma treasure. Di Tianming's expression changed because he knew very well that only a few people knew about the Blood Witch Massacre Knife. Now that Haoping said that he knew about the Blood Witch Massacre Knife, and that it was a top-notch battle weapon in the higher planes, how could Di Tianming not be confused? The blood witch massacre knife was indeed very powerful, but Di Tianming did not lose his mind. In the celestial spirit realm or demon spirit realm, the blood witch massacre knife was a top-notch battle knife, but in the higher planes, it definitely wouldn't be ranked. Although Di Tianming didn't know what Enhalping meant, it didn't stop him from being suspicious. Tell me about the Zhang clan. Tell me everything that you know. Seeing Di Tianming's gloomy expression, Enhalping shrugged his shoulders and said, "As long as you behave, I promise I won't kill you." "Are you sure you won't kill me?" Di Tianming's heart jolted, and he hurriedly said, "I want you to swear the heavenly Tao oath." "No problem." Enhalping nodded his head before swearing an oath to the heavens in front of Di Tianming. The worry in Di Tianming's heart immediately lessened when he saw Enhalping swear an oath. However, how could Di Tianming give up such a rare opportunity? Taking a deep breath, Di Tianming said again, "I want to be like Sun Deshan." Whoosh! Di Tianming's words caused Enhalping's face to darken. Enhalping would be a little stupid if he still didn't understand Di Tianming's intentions. Not long ago, he had joined hands with Yi Jiming to rescue Sun Deshan from the clutches of Ningyu. Di Tianming's intentions were clear. He wanted to regain his freedom. To kill or not to kill. At this moment, Yi Jiming grabbed Di Zhao's shoulder and walked over. He said in a low voice, "Di Tianming is the sage of the Zhang family. I'm afraid that if we delay too long, the Zhang family will send their experts over. Don't forget that the Zhang family is one of the 9 great families of the demon spirit realm. Once they send a late sage realm warrior over, we will be in great danger. I hope you will consider this carefully. Do not bring us into the abyss." Hearing Yi Jiming's words, Enhalping stood rooted to the ground with a gloomy expression. Killing had its benefits. Not killing them also had its own benefits. Enhalping was very conflicted. "Help me. I want to use a secret technique to control him." After a while, Enhalping gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice, "A mere early-stage sage dares to negotiate with me? He's simply courting death. You said you wouldn't kill me." When he heard Enhalping's cold words, Di Tianming raised his right hand and pointed at Enhalping. He even stuttered when he spoke. "What you? I did say that I wouldn't kill you, but that was based on the premise that you told me the secrets of the Zhang family. Now that you haven't said anything, why can't I kill you?" The corners of Enhalping's mouth curled up, and his expression became extremely gloomy. "Xiao!" In the next moment, Enhalping rose from the ground and rushed towards Di Tianming from the left. Whoosh! Following closely behind Enhalping was Yi Jiming, who was at the intermediate stage sage. Yi Jiming rushed towards Di Tianming from the right. With Sun Deshan glaring at him from the left and right, Di Tianming had no chance to fight back and was sent flying dozens of feet away. Normally, Enhalping would have teased him a little, but now, Enhalping was in no mood at all. There was only one thought in Enhalping's mind, and that was to dig out everything in Di Tianming's head before Ningyu killed him. He placed his right hand on Di Tianming's head, and a steady stream of soul power entered Di Tianming's body. As the soul power entered Di Tianming's head, Di Tianming kept screaming hysterically. Memory deprivation. Not to mention that Di Tianming's cultivation was at the early stage sage. Even if Di Tianming's cultivation was at the intermediate stage sage, or even the late stage sage, he would not be able to bear the pain of having his memory deprived. This pain was not superficial, but deep in his bones. Damn it! The more he devoured Di Tianming's memory, the uglier Enhalping's face became. In the end, Enhalping even cursed. After half an hour of work, Enhalping finally stripped all of Di Tianming's memories. From Di Tianming's memory, Enhalping learned a lot of useful information, especially about the blood witch massacre knife. Back in the demon spirit realm, there were rumors that the blood witch massacre knife was no longer with the Zhang family, and that it was brought to a higher plane by the Zhang family's second family head. However, from what Enhalping knew, the blood witch massacre knife was still with the Zhang family, and it was in the Zhang family's forbidden area. After hearing this news, Enhalping's face became a little better. After thinking for a while, Enhalping decided not to tell the other 2 guys about this news, but to keep it for himself for a while. The blood witch massacre knife was a treasure. Who wouldn't want it? The in-family status among the 9 great families in the demon spirit realm was not very high, and it could only hover around the middle. If he could get the blood witch massacre knife this time, the Zhang family would definitely rise, and they would at least be ranked in the upper middle among the 9 great families. Crack! After devouring the memory in Di Tianming's mind, and Haoping exerted a little force in his right hand and directly broke Di Tianming's neck. And Haoping did it quickly. Not only did he break Di Tianming's neck, but he also destroyed Di Tianming's Deen. His neck was broken, and his spirit was destroyed. Di Tianming's fate was almost certain. What should we do with him? After killing Di Tianming, and Haoping's gaze shifted to Di Xiao, and he said faintly, I don't want our plan to be leaked before we enter the Emperor Divine Palace. What do you think we should do? He Jiming's gaze was still on Di Xiao, and he said calmly, Kill, without mercy. And Haoping stretched out his right hand and made a gesture of cutting his neck. We can't kill him. He Jiming's face was terrifyingly gloomy, and he said gloomily, Di Xiao is the most important part. If he dies, we will all be finished. He's just a warrior in the early stage of the Sage Realm, so it doesn't matter if he dies. And Haoping shrugged and said, Don't forget, the enemy is in the dark, and we are in the light. If the enemy plays tricks on us, even if we keep Di Xiao alive, it will be of no use. If I say to keep him alive, he must stay. He Jiming's tone was firm and unquestionable. You and I will work together to temporarily seal Di Xiao's soul power and perception, so that Ningyu can't get in touch with him. And Haoping rolled his eyes, expressing his helplessness. Since He Jiming had said so, and Haoping naturally would not refuse. Chapter 1752. Chapter 1752. Chapter 1752 Inch, let's go. After sealing Di Xiao's soul strength and perception, He Jiming shouted in a low voice. Then he grabbed Di Xiao's arm and rushed into the Emperor Palace. Seeing He Jiming leave, and Haoping did not hesitate at all and followed closely behind him. To be honest, and Haoping was very worried after spending so much time here. Since Di Tianming was being controlled, it meant that Zhang Chong and Zhang Kejuan were probably being controlled as well. And Haoping had 2 tasks in the Emperor Palace, one of which was to find Zhang Chong and Zhang Kejuan. Once this task failed, it would be a huge blow to Haoping. And Haoping didn't come here alone. There were also the icily handsome man and the smiling tiger from the other war god families in Divine City. Let's split up. Not long after entering the Emperor Palace, and Haoping felt Zhang Kejuan's aura. Without talking too much nonsense with He Jiming, and Haoping directly turned his head and swept in another direction. He Jiming knew that Haoping's target was Zhang Chong and Zhang Kejuan, so he did not stop him. Moreover, Zhang Chong was a middle-stage sage. If Haoping dealt with him, He Jiming could save a lot of trouble. Di Xiao, you two tell me honestly, where are Human Devil and Ningyu? Until Haoping was far away, He Jiming turned his eyes to Di Xiao. In He Jiming's opinion, since Di Xiao was guarding the Emperor Palace for Ningyu, he must know where Ningyu was. Di Xiao did not refuse. After pondering for a moment, he said, According to my estimation, Ningyu and Human Demon should be in the hall at this time. Let's go to the hall. He Jiming was swift and decisive. Now that Di Xiao's soul strength and perception were sealed, it was impossible for Ningyu to contact Di Xiao. Under this premise, Di Xiao would not lie. Swish, swish. As He Jiming and the others were relatively close to the main hall, it only took them a minute to arrive in front of the main hall. Bang! Without knocking on the door, He Jiming raised his right foot and kicked the door of the main hall. A crisp sound rang out. He Jiming directly kicked the heavy door into 2 halves. Xiao! As soon as the door was kicked open, a cold glint shot towards He Jiming at a frightening speed. Not good. The sudden change caused He Jiming's expression to change drastically, and he hastily retreated. In fact, before He Jiming blasted open the door, he was already prepared for a sneak attack. But He Jiming neglected one thing. He had neglected the cultivation of the person who had ambushed him. Generally speaking, in the case of the same cultivation, even if someone sneak attacked Hijiming would not be so flustered. The reason why Hijiming was so flustered this time was because the martial artist who ambushed him had a higher cultivation level than him. Late-stage saint. Moreover, he was at the peak of late-stage saint. Hijiming's current cultivation level was only at the middle stage of the sage realm. He did not have much of a chance of winning, even if he were to face a martial artist at the peak of the late stage of the sage realm head-on. Not to mention that the other party had chosen to launch a sneak attack. However, Hijiming was still rational. He did not choose to meet force with force. Instead, he ignited his blood essence and retreated. Boom! It turned out that Hijiming's retreat was wise. As soon as his front foot retreated, a huge pit appeared in the area where his back foot was. Obviously, the huge pit was caused by the cold glint. Trying to be mysterious, Hijiming stared at the entrance of the hall and said coldly, "Hurry up and get out." Rustle. Not long after Hijiming's voice fell, a group of 3 martial artists slowly walked out of the hall. Hiss! Looking at the martial artists who had suddenly appeared, Hijiming could not help but gasp at this time, especially when he sensed the terrifying aura of the martial artist on the left. Even though he already knew the other party's cultivation level, guessing was one thing, but when the other party really appeared in front of him, Hijiming still wanted to retreat. The reason why Hijiming had such a reaction was not because he was afraid of a late-stage Saint martial artist. On the contrary, as long as he used his last trump card, he could even easily kill a late-stage Saint martial artist. However, Hijiming did not dare to use his last trump card, because once he used his last trump card, he was destined to fail one of the 2 tasks that he had come from high-level plane. Compared to taking Emperor Shao away, the other task was more important. I have to contact the sect as soon as possible and ask them to send people down as soon as possible. Hijiming made up his mind that after successfully regaining control of Emperor Divine Palace, he would contact the sect as soon as possible. Some time ago, Hijiming had contacted the sect once, and the sect had also agreed to send a few middle-stage Saint martial artists down to help. However, Hijiming felt that it was not enough. He had to send a late-stage Saint or even a peak Saint martial artist. However, Hijiming was very clear that the sect would have to bear great pressure if they sent a late-stage Saint or a peak Saint martial artist down. Hijiming, I was feeling sorry that you ran away last time. I didn't expect you to come to me voluntarily. Just as Hijiming was thinking about it, Ning Yu's indifferent voice sounded in this area. Since you're here, stay and have a good chat this time. Crack, crack. Hijiming came to his senses and stared at Ning Yu, clenching his fists so hard that they made cracking sounds. Why, do you want to kill me? Ning Yu raised his eyebrows and said, I'm standing here. You could try. Go up and kill him. All of a sudden, an indifferent voice was heard. Following closely behind the indifferent voice was a figure that was speeding over. No, to be precise, it was 2 figures rushing over. After a while, An Halping grabbed Zhang Keyuan's shoulder and threw him aside. He looked straight at Hijiming and said, Hijiming, I'll help you deal with that late-stage Saint martial artist. You go and kill this arrogant guy. Speaking of this, An Halping paused for a moment and then continued. In addition, bring Zhang Chong here. Hijiming's eyes flickered, but he did not do as An Halping said. In fact, the moment An Halping came over, Hijiming knew what An Halping was planning to do. Zhang Keyuan was brought here, so Zhang Chong definitely could not escape. Are you sure you can help me stop that late-stage Saint martial artist? Hijiming gritted his teeth and said, If you can really help me stop him, I promise to help you control Zhang Chong. Hijiming was still very confident in himself. As long as the white-haired old man, who was a late-stage saint, was stalled, he and Sun Deshun would definitely be able to control Zhang Chong. Sun Deshun's cultivation was at the peak of the early-stage saint, which was not particularly far from the late-stage saint. With Sun Deshun's help, Hijiming's inner concerns were reduced a lot. How can it be fake? An Halping raised the corner of his mouth and immediately rushed out. Chapter 1753. No Mercy. Let's go. Seeing and Halping charging at the white-haired old man, Jiming didn't hesitate and immediately made his move. His biggest opponent was being held up by an Halping. If he and Sun Deshun couldn't take down Zhang Chong, it wouldn't be right. As for Ningyu, Jiming didn't put him in his eyes at all. Jiming was confident that he could crush an initial heavenly supreme cultivator with one hand. Rumble. A great battle broke out in an instant. After the white-haired old man revealed his trump card, he could now unleash the strength of a peak late-stage saint. And Halping didn't have any advantage against the white-haired old man. On the contrary, he was at a slight disadvantage. On the other side of the battlefield, Jiming and Zhang Chong were fighting fiercely. Under normal circumstances, Zhang Chong and Jiming's strength was on par. But with Sun Deshun, Jiming's chances of winning were much higher. The results of the two battles weren't satisfactory. How restless! Ningyu's gaze rested on the battlefield between an Halping and the white-haired old man. Taking a deep breath, Ningyu's face turned a little gloomy. The white-haired old man took about an hour just to use his trump card. Now that he only had a small advantage, Ningyu was naturally dissatisfied. He didn't know when the demonic human would recover to his peak state. He was relying on the white-haired old man to take the blame. If the white-haired old man dropped the ball, the consequences would be unimaginable. Thinking of this, Ningyu began to draw the drop of battle god's blood in the white-haired old man's sea of consciousness. The white-haired old man was originally fighting happily with an Halping, but he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and his face turned a little pale. Spitting out blood was secondary. The most important thing was that an Halping seized the opportunity. An Halping raised his right foot and heavily kicked the white-haired old man's chest. Bang! The enormous force transmitted from his chest caused the white-haired old man's body to be swiftly sent flying backwards. A crisp sound rang out beside Ningyu. Obviously, the white-haired old man wasn't too far away from Ningyu. I'll give you one last chance. Ignoring the white-haired old man's miserable state, Ningyu frowned slightly and said, "Defeat him within 3 minutes. Otherwise, you should know the consequences." Boom! Hearing this, the white-haired elder's heart thumped. The white-haired old man knew very well that since Ningyu had given him an order, he had to complete it. After all, his sea of consciousness contained Ningyu's war god physique's blood. Before expelling the blood of the divine body of war from his divine sense sea, he could only obey Ningyu's orders. I promised to complete the mission. The white-haired old man gritted his teeth and quickly got up from the ground. In order to make Ningyu trust him, the white-haired old man even patted his chest and promised, "Within 3 minutes, I promise to bring his head here." Bang! Halfway through his sentence, the white-haired old man felt a tremendous force on his buttocks, and his body was sent flying. Looking at the white-haired old man's departing figure, Ningyu rolled his eyes and said, "I'm not asking you to suck up to me. If you can't take him down this time, I promise to teach you a lesson." Crack, crack, crack. Due to Ningyu's beating, the white-haired old man's subsequent attacks became even more vicious. In fact, even space itself began to tremble and creaking noises could be heard. Under the white-haired old man's powerful attacks, and Halping was forced to retreat step by step and lost ground. Damn it! Are you on steroids? The white-haired old man's sudden outburst caught and Halping off guard. And Halping chose to avoid the attack while contacting Jiming hurriedly. No matter what, Jiming was a mid-stage sage. With his help, and Halping would definitely be able to withstand the white-haired old man's powerful attacks. However, and Halping overlooked something. At this time, Jiming couldn't even protect himself. How could he have time to care about Zhang Chong's life? Damn it! How did you become so strong? After forcing Zhang Chong to retreat, Jiming rubbed his slightly swollen eyes. His face was blue and white, which was very ugly. Previously, Jiming thought that he and Zhang Chong were on par, and he was not the only one who thought so. It was estimated that many people thought so. However, After a few minutes of fighting, He Jiming knew that he was a little weaker than Zhang Chong without using his last trump card. With Sun Deshun's help, he could barely tie with Zhang Chong. Moreover, this tie had already been declared non-existent when Ningyu beat the white-haired old man. Perhaps he was worried that Ningyu would get angry, or perhaps he was worried that Ningyu would be dissatisfied. In short, Zhang Chong's combat effectiveness instantly rose by several percent. Don't underestimate this combat effectiveness. Zhang Chong was a mid-stage sage, and every increase in strength was a huge pressure on the early-stage sage Sun Deshun. After a while, when Zhang Chong's strength rose by 50%, Sun Deshun finally couldn't hold on any longer and was sent flying like a dead dog. Bang! His heavy body slammed into the ground, producing a sound that was not particularly loud. Originally, Ningyu didn't care about Sun Deshun's life or death, but when he thought of the human demon refining the immortal ascension grass and the little Qilin helping from the side, Ningyu decided to send Sun Deshun into the Tower of Ascension. This time, Ningyu only brought Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man out of the Great Hall. As for the human demon and the little Qilin, they stayed in the Tower of Ascension. If he gave them some energy at this time, they might be able to recover a step earlier. As long as the human demon could recover and use the power of the immortal ascension grass to suppress the energy seal, he could even raise his cultivation to the late-stage sage realm. At that time, with the human demon's help, he might be able to control He Jiming and Enhalping. Just the thought of controlling a late-stage sage cultivator excited him. What are you doing? Sun Deshun's eyes narrowed as he looked at the approaching Ningyu, who had a smirk on his face. He hurriedly said, I had no choice. He Jiming and Enhalping provoked me, and they insisted on helping me resolve it. Crack. Ningyu wasn't interested in Sun Deshun's nonsense. He raised his right foot and stomped heavily on Sun Deshun's head. Sun Deshun was already heavily injured, and now that Ningyu had stomped on his head, he stopped breathing on the spot. Get in. Ningyu knew that this stomp couldn't kill an early-stage sage cultivator. So after stomping, Ningyu immediately grabbed Sun Deshun's shoulder and threw him into the Tower of Ascension. Whoosh! Only when Sun Deshun entered the Tower of Ascension did Ningyu let out a long breath. As the saying went, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. In that instant, Ningyu was really worried that Sun Deshun would fight to the death with him. Sun Deshun's aura was gone, but his primordial spirit was still there. If the primordial spirit of a peak early-stage sage cultivator really fought to the death, it would be somewhat troublesome. Taking the initiative to deal with Sun Deshun had put Ningyu at great risk. This wasn't because Ningyu took the initiative to take the risk, but because he wanted to show Di Xiao. Chapter 1754. Chapter 1754. Compromise compared to Sun Deshun. At least Di Xiao was more important to He Jiming. He Jiming was more willing to take risks for Di Xiao. Turning his head to look at the two battlefields, Ningyu slightly furrowed his brows. He moved his feet and walked toward Di Xiao. Ka. Di Xiao's eyes were cold. He clenched his fists and his whole body trembled. The person Di Xiao wanted to kill the most was Ningyu. In fact, even if Ningyu hadn't made such a big move in the Divine Emperor Palace, Di Xiao would still want to kill Ningyu. Di Xiao not only wanted to kill Ningyu, but also Ningyu's parents. Originally, Di Xiao wanted to wait until this matter was over, then personally go to the Supreme Nine Purities Temple and let those old guys in the Supreme Nine Purities Temple see how wrong Mu Yunshan's choice of Ninghai was. But now it seemed that it might be a little difficult, not to mention whether Ningyu would kill him. Even if Ningyu didn't kill him, He Jiming would take him to a higher plane. Relatively speaking, it was easier to go from a lower plane to a higher plane. Descending from a higher plane was 10 times more difficult. Of course, Di Xiao was only half right. Ningyu wouldn't kill him, because Ningyu felt that he had secrets. As for the other half, He Jiming would take him to a higher plane, which was very likely his wishful thinking. He Jiming had been suppressed by Zhang Chong to the point that he couldn't breathe. It was unknown how long he could last. Your mind is in a mess. Ningyu stopped 5 meters away from Di Xiao. Staring at Di Xiao, Ningyu said faintly, "From your eyes, I see a strong killing intent, but at the same time, speaking of this," Ningyu paused for a moment and then continued, "You are afraid that I have a backup plan. However, you don't have to worry about that. To tell you the truth, I don't have any tricks up my sleeves. In fact, if you attack me, you will immediately capture me." Ningyu's words set off a storm in Di Xiao's heart. If Ningyu hadn't mentioned it, Di Xiao wouldn't have been so afraid. Di Xiao had even thought of making a sudden move to capture Ningyu. However, since Ningyu had said so, Di Xiao had no choice but to take it seriously. From Di Xiao's point of view, with Ningyu's shrewdness, how could he not have a backup plan? Perhaps Ningyu had already set up a trap for him and was waiting for him to fall into it. "What, are you scared?" Seeing Di Xiao standing there with his eyes flickering, Ningyu's tone suddenly changed, and he said coldly, "If you are afraid, then quickly remove the seal on your body, or you should know the consequences." Di Xiao's heart thumped. At this time, Di Xiao faintly felt some lingering fear. Fortunately, he didn't act rashly just now. Otherwise, with Ningyu's usual domineering style, he would have long been finished. If Ningyu knew what Di Xiao was thinking at this time, his mouth would probably twitch. As the saying goes, using the tiger's skin to accomplish great things. Now, Ningyu only threatened a little, without even using the tiger's skin, and forced Di Xiao to admit defeat. "The seal on my body was jointly set up by He Jiming and Enhalping. Relying on my ability alone, it is impossible to break it." Taking a deep breath, Di Xiao's face was solemn, and he said, "If you have the ability," Di Xiao didn't continue the rest of the sentence, but the meaning was self-evident. Di Xiao did choose to admit defeat, but he was not that stupid. Di Xiao's attitude was very clear. "I can admit defeat, but you have to show the strength that you deserve." How could you not know what Di Xiao was thinking? But breaking the seal on Di Xiao's body, Ningyu couldn't do it all. Although he couldn't do it, Ningyu didn't refuse Di Xiao. Instead, he said coldly, "Enter the Tower of Yuzuan, and the human demon will naturally help you break the seal." This, Di Xiao's mouth opened, and his face looked very conflicted. It was still the same problem. On one hand, Di Xiao wanted a compromise, but on the other hand, he was worried that Ningyu was playing tricks. Although He Jiming and Enhalping were at a disadvantage, who knew the final result? If He Jiming and Enhalping won, and he went to Ningyu's side, wouldn't he be unable to please both sides? Ningyu snorted coldly, then immediately moved his feet and retreated a little further. Since he failed to get something without risking anything, Ningyu naturally wouldn't stay any longer. Once Di Xiao became ruthless and attacked him without hesitation, wouldn't the consequences be dire? Judging from a situation on the other two battlefields, He Jiming and Enhalping's defeat was only a matter of time. At this time, there was no need for Ningyu to gamble his life with Di Xiao. If he won the gamble, it would be fine, but if he lost, it would really be over. Bang! Bang! Not long after Ningyu retreated, the outcome of the battle in the distance was decided. Two crisp sounds rang out one after the other, indicating that both He Jiming and Enhalping had lost. Puffed, puffed, heavily slamming into the ground. He Jiming and Enhalping spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Whoosh, whoosh. He Jiming and Enhalping had just been defeated, but Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man chose to follow up their victory. Hit the snake where it hurts, don't hold back. Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man knew very well that Ningyu definitely didn't want to see He Jiming and Enhalping escape. Although it would be difficult for Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man to kill He Jiming and Enhalping with their strength, capturing them wouldn't be a problem. I choose to enter the Tower of Ascension. Di Xiao still had the foresight to size up the situation. Seeing that He Jiming and Enhalping had been defeated, Di Xiao immediately decided to compromise. As long as there's life, there's hope. Di Xiao wasn't a fool. He knew that he could only compromise with Ningyu. Compromise was the only way out. If this dragged on, when Ningyu's patience ran out, he wouldn't even have the chance to compromise. "Welcome." Ningyu was slightly taken aback, but he quickly opened the Tower of Ascension for Di Xiao. Since Ningyu wanted to study Di Xiao again, he didn't make things difficult for him at this time. There was still a long way to go. There was no need to waste too much time on Di Xiao at such a critical moment. Ningyu arranged for Di Xiao to stay on the second floor of the Tower of Ascension, then put away the Tower of Ascension and walked forward. Not far from Ningyu, He Jiming and Enhaoping were both kneeling on the ground with unwillingness. Compared to Enhaoping, He Jiming was even more furious. He Jiming clenched his fists so tightly that his nails dug into his palms. He didn't care at all. At this moment, He Jiming's heart was in a fierce struggle. He Jiming had two thoughts in his mind. One was to disregard everything and use his final trump card. He had to kill Ningyu and the others even at the risk of being punished by the sect. The other was to compromise temporarily, then wait for an opportunity. No matter which idea it wasn't good for He Jiming. He Jiming wasn't stupid. On the contrary, he was very smart. If he used his final trump card now, even if he could kill Ningyu, he would be remembered by the sect's upper echelons. If he was remembered by the sect's upper echelons, he could only wait to die. Chapter 1755. Chapter 1755. Chapter 1755 Communicating with a High-Level Plane. What should I do? Looking at Ningyu, who was walking toward him, He Jiming's eyes flickered, and he was struggling internally. It was not good to compromise, nor was it good to not compromise. For a moment, He Jiming was completely at a loss. I'll take a gamble. Seeing that Ningyu was about to reach him, He Jiming gritted his teeth and made a decision. Compromise. After some comparison, He Jiming felt that compromise was the best solution. Although it was dangerous to compromise, He Jiming had no choice but to compromise. If he didn't compromise, he would be killed immediately. If he compromised, there was still a chance of survival. You came from a high-level plane. Not long after, Ningyu stood in front of He Jiming, raised his eyebrows, and said lightly, "Why is your cultivation only at the mid-stage of the Sage Realm?" Hearing Ningyu's words, He Jiming's face darkened. What did he mean by his cultivation only at the mid-stage of the Sage Realm? One must know that there was a plane barrier between high-level planes and low-level planes. The plane barrier of the immortal spirit realm had a fatal suppressive effect on the warriors who descended from high-level planes. In the high-level planes, although He Jiming's cultivation did not surpass the Sage Realm, it was also at the Sage Perfection Realm. After being suppressed by the plane barrier, He Jiming's cultivation was only at the mid-stage of the Sage Realm. He Jiming did not believe that Ningyu did not know this, but he still braced himself and explained, "Actually, my cultivation is at the Sage Perfection Realm, but Sage Perfection Realm?" Ningyu did not pay attention to the rest of He Jiming's words. What Ningyu cared about was He Jiming's original cultivation. After thinking about it, Ningyu asked again, "How many more people will descend from the high-level planes?" Swoosh! He Jiming's expression changed, and he had a vague feeling that something was wrong. The focus of Ningyu's attention was what He Jiming was most worried about. The reason why He Jiming chose to compromise was that he would be killed immediately if he did not compromise. The second reason was that he knew that more experts from the sect would descend. Now that Ningyu was concerned about this, He Jiming suddenly became very vigilant. The price of descending from a higher plane to a lower plane is too great. The sect sending us to the immortal spirit realm is already exhausting the strength of a sect. He Jiming cautiously said, "In my opinion, at least for a short period of time, there will be no more martial practitioners from the sect descending here." "You're not being honest." Ningyu supported his chin with one hand and sighed softly. Then he said, "How about this? You came from a higher plane. I don't want to make things difficult for you." After leaving these words, Ningyu did not care about He Jiming's reaction. Instead, he turned to look at Enhaoping and said indifferently, "State your identity." Ningyu had long since confirmed He Jiming's identity. He knew that He Jiming came from a higher plane. However, Ningyu wasn't particularly familiar with Enhaoping. Judging from He Jiming's attitude toward Enhaoping, He Jiming wasn't afraid of Enhaoping. The middle stage sage, He Jiming wasn't afraid of the late stage sage Enhaoping. There could only be one result, and helping wasn't from a higher plane. Oomph. Falling into your hands is the biggest stain on my life. Do whatever you want of me. And helping still had his pride. He didn't give Ningyu any face. Instead, he snorted coldly and said, "However, I have to remind you that you're a grasshopper after autumn. You won't be able to jump around for long." Ningyu didn't take Helping's mockery to heart. If he couldn't even take such words, then Ningyu would have lived his life in vain. After a moment of silence, Ningyu decided to let Helping learn his lesson. Just because I'm not angry doesn't mean I'll spoil you. Ningyu winked to the white-haired old man. Then he crossed his arms in front of his chest and didn't say anything. Seeing Ningyu's actions, the white-haired old man was stunned at first. Then he instantly understood. It was obvious. In the blink of an eye, Ningyu wanted to dig out Helping's eyes. Thinking of this, the white-haired old man's heart couldn't help but tremble. Ningyu was only an early-stage Sky Supreme, but he could play them in the palm of his hand. It had to be said that his methods were indeed amazing. Poochie, Poochie. In the next instant, the white-haired old man's right hand formed a scissor and quickly stretched out. Two crisp sounds rang out consecutively. Ah! What followed was Helping's hysterical scream. My eyes, woo. Helping covered his eyes with both hands, and his entire person became violent. The excruciating pain of losing both of his eyes made Helping lose his composure all of a sudden. The reason why Helping dared to mock Ningyu was because he saw that Ningyu didn't do anything to Jiming. He felt that Ningyu wouldn't touch him. He had nothing to fear, and Helping was indeed fearless earlier. He thought that Ningyu wanted to control him, so he mocked Ningyu first. Who knew? He might be able to find a loophole. Who would have thought that he would go for wool and come home shorn? He suffered a double loss. Although losing his eyes didn't affect Helping too much at his cultivation level, this humiliation was something he couldn't accept. Under these circumstances, even if he returned to the infamily in the demon spirit realm, he would still be mocked by all sorts of people. He might even lose his core position in the infamily. In the infamily, there weren't many people who would offer help in times of need, but there were many people who would beat a dog when it was down. I don't want to ask the same thing twice. Ningyu's indifferent voice rang out in Helping's ears once more. Helping trembled and hurriedly said, "I'm from the infamily in the demon spirit realm." The infamily in the demon spirit realm? Huh. Ningyu thought for a moment, then asked, "What's your relationship with Qianhao?" Qianhao? Helping was slightly taken aback, then said, "He should be at the early stage sage realm. His status in the infamily isn't particularly high." In that case, the infamily should have many sage realm cultivators? Ningyu asked again. That's right. The infamily does have many sage realm cultivators. As for the exact number, I'm not too sure, Helping said honestly. Ningyu's expression changed slightly. He knew that there were 9 great families in the demon spirit realm. The infamily's ranking among the 9 great families wasn't particularly high. In fact, it could only be ranked in the lower middle. However, even a family with such a ranking had many Sage Realm cultivators. From this, it could be seen how many Sage Realm cultivators the top few families had. The more Ningyu thought about it, the more he felt that something was amiss. Logically speaking, the Immortal Spirit Realm and Demon Spirit Realm were neighbors. Since there were so many Sage Realm cultivators in the Demon Spirit Realm, there shouldn't be so few in the Immortal Spirit Realm. As if sensing Ningyu's confusion, Helping explained, actually, there are also sects in the Immortal Spirit Realm that can communicate with the higher level planes and continuously send resources down. Ningyu's heart skipped a beat. This time, he finally understood what Helping was trying to say. The reason why the 9 great families in the Demon Spirit Realm had so many sages was because they could communicate with the higher level planes and obtain large amounts of cultivation resources. Chapter 1756. I see. Now, Ningyu understood everything. By now, Ningyu had understood everything. Originally, Ningyu had been wondering why the demonic spirit realm had conquered the central mainland a long time ago, but had not attacked the Dancheng mainland. Now, It seemed that it was because the families of the primordial spirit realm that could communicate with high-level planes had appeared and stopped the 9 superfamilies of the demonic spirit realm. Otherwise, not to mention the Danshan continent, even the other continents would have been conquered long ago. The Zhang family wants to ally with the Emperor Palace. Don't tell me you have the same goal. Ningyu stared at Haoping, waiting to hear his answer. I came to the Emperor Palace with a different goal from the Zhang family. And Haoping knew that he had to divert Ningyu's attention from him to He Jiming. Otherwise, if Ningyu continued to ask, he would definitely be in trouble. Moreover, diverting Ningyu's attention would buy him enough time. He had not done anything for such a long time. The cold-looking man and the smiling tiger would definitely not ignore him. As long as the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger came, would Ningyu still be able to escape? Although the white-haired old man was a late-stage sage, the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger were 2 late-stage sages if they joined forces. After sorting out his thoughts, and Haoping said in a deep voice, "I'm doing this for He Jiming. As far as I know, the reason why he descended from a high-level plane is to obtain the origin energy of the primordial spirit state." Rumble. When Haoping said this, He Jiming became irritable. He Jiming was very confused. Even the Saint martial artist who had descended with him did not know about the origin energy, so how did Haoping know about it? Although He Jiming was confused, he did not have time to get to the bottom of the problem. He was highly focused. As long as Ningyu showed any intention of killing him, he would use his trump card at all costs. Why should I believe you? Ningyu did not overreact. Instead, he frowned slightly and said, "Give me a reason to believe you. There's no need for me to lie to you. If you can obtain the source energy, then your cultivation can instantly reach the saint realm." And Haoping hurriedly said and began to tempt Ningyu. "You let the white-haired old man release his control over me. I have a way to make He Jiming admit it. Let go of my control over you. Do you think I'm stupid?" Ningyu couldn't be bothered with Haoping. He turned to look at He Jiming and asked, "Did you descend from a higher plane to obtain the source energy of the celestial spirit stage?" "No, absolutely not. My purpose is to bring Di Xiao to the high plane. Di Xiao is the person that the elders of the sect want by name. As for what's special about him, I don't know." He Jiming shook his head like a rattle drum and hastily said, "Hand over all the treasures you brought down from the higher planes." Ningyu did not seem to care much about the Emperor Flute and the origin energy. He casually threw a storage bag to He Jiming. "Ha!" Catching the storage bag, He Jiming did not say anything and immediately put all the magic treasures, elixirs, and medicinal herbs he had on him into the storage bag. For He Jiming, as long as Ningyu did not care about the source energy, everything was fine. He Jiming did not dare to admit to the matter of the source energy. Once he admitted it, there would naturally be people in the sect who would deal with him. After receiving the storage bag that He Jiming threw over, Ningyu casually threw it into his storage ring and did not speak again. Ningyu did not speak, and the others naturally did not dare to speak. For a moment, the entire area became quiet. Zhang Chong stared at He Jiming. The white-haired old man stared at Haoping, and Ningyu closed his eyes to rest. As for Zhang Kajuan, who was far away, he had already fainted, being targeted by Haoping. How could a half-saint martial artist like Zhang Kajuan have a good ending? If it were not for the seal in Zhang Kajuan's sea of consciousness, Zhang Kajuan would have long been devoured by Haoping and killed. It was because of the seal left by the family's higher-ups in his sea of consciousness that Zhang Kajuan had temporarily escaped and had a chance to struggle at death's door. Senior human demon, how long will it take for you to recover? Ningyu closed his eyes to rest, but it did not mean that he was very relaxed. On the contrary, Ningyu was very worried at this time. As the saying goes, a dog that bites does not bark. And Haoping's current state was that of a mad dog, deliberately diverting attention. As a late Saint martial artist of the Yin family, and the Yin family could even contact high-level planes, Ningyu would be the first to believe that Haoping did not have any ambitions. According to Ningyu's speculation, Haoping was waiting for the experts of the Yin family to come. It was true that Haoping was waiting, but wasn't Ningyu also waiting? Haoping was waiting for the experts of the Yin family to come, while Ningyu was waiting for the human demon to recover to his peak state. I've long recovered, but I'm currently suppressing the energy seal. I want to rely on the remaining power of the Ascension Immortal Grass to raise my cultivation to the peak of Late Saint. Inside the Yuzuan Pagoda, the human demon threw Sun Deshun's corpse to the side and replied, "You wait on your side." Although the human demon was inside the Yuzuan Pagoda, he was completely aware of what was happening outside. With the little Qilin's help, and Ningyu giving all the Qilin fruits and Qilin blood to the human demon, the human demon had already recovered 10 minutes ago. However, the human demon knew very well that recovery was not the main point. The main point was whether he could raise his cultivation to the peak of Late Saint. After the little Qilin helped the human demon recover to the mid-saint stage, it returned to the little girl with golden hair. As for the suppression of the energy seal, it was entirely up to the human demon himself. If it really doesn't work, we can temporarily hide. Ningyu thought about it and voiced his concerns. According to Ningyu's plan, after taking down He Jiming and Enhalping, they would immediately leave Divine Emperor Palace. However, the human demon did not think so. The human demon wanted to capture the martial artists behind Enhalping and the martial artists from the higher planes in one fell swoop to avoid future troubles. At the same time, the human demon said that if Ningyu was worried, he could leave first. Since the human demon had already said that, it would be a little unreasonable for Ningyu to leave now. We can't drag this out for long, at most 10 minutes. Ningyu gritted his teeth, and Halping's little tricks naturally did not escape Ningyu's eyes. If this continued, he believed that in less than 10 minutes, the martial artist behind Enhalping would arrive. Moreover, apart from Enhalping, He Jiming was also gradually becoming restless. Under such circumstances, Ningyu naturally did not want to take any more risks. 10 minutes is enough. The human demon revealed an expression of relief and said, "Just watch. You don't need to worry about the rest. Just sit back and watch the show." Hearing Ningyu's solemn tone, the human demon thought that he did not have much time left. Who would have thought that there would still be 10 minutes left? Chapter 1757. A Foolproof Plan. Tick. Tick. Time was ticking away. 10 minutes wasn't long, but wasn't short either. He Jiming and Enhalping did not dare to act rashly. For them, as long as the person behind them did not come, maintaining the status quo was the best choice. Moreover, Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man were still eyeing them. If they chose to go against Ningyu at this time, they would be courting their own deaths. Their brains must have been filled with shit. However, if the person behind them came, then they would have the capital to deal with Ningyu and could have a good fight with Ningyu. Of course, all of this was based on the premise that the people behind them came. Therefore, at this time, He Jiming and Enhalping were even looking forward to Ningyu waiting. Otherwise, if the warrior behind them did not come and Ningyu suddenly went crazy, who could they reason with? Naturally, Ningyu would not care about He Jiming and Enhalping's schemes. That was because Ningyu was very conflicted. To be honest, Ningyu did not want to wait for 10 minutes. In Ningyu's opinion, even if the human demon refined the remaining immortal ascension grass in his body and raised his cultivation to the peak of the late-stage sage, it was not very safe. He Jiming came from a high-level plane and was a middle-stage sage. It was conceivable that if another expert came, his cultivation would definitely be higher than He Jiming's. One late-stage sage warrior could be dealt with by the human demon. What about 2? What about 3? What if a warrior at the peak of the sage realm came? Even if there was a plane barrier, it would be very difficult for a sage from a high-level plane to come down. But what about Enhalping? Enhalping was a late-stage sage and was an expert of the Infamily, one of the 9 great families of the demon spirit realm. The rescuers that Enhalping was looking forward to would at least be late-stage sage. Thinking that many late-stage sage warriors might come later, Ningyu's mind suddenly became active. He controlled Zhang Chong and the white-haired elder, while Zhang Chong and the white-haired elder controlled He Jiming and Enhalping. This kind of relationship seemed very solid, but when it came to a critical moment, it would instead become a breakthrough point. Actually, It was not that there was no solution to this problem, it was just that it was more difficult. Ningyu actively controlled He Jiming and Enhalping. Of course, it was very difficult. It was so difficult that even Ningyu wanted to give up. However, Ningyu was very clear that if he did not act decisively, he would fall into chaos. No matter how difficult it was better than being schemed against later on. Taking a deep breath, Ningyu waved to Zhang Chong and the white-haired elder, motioning them to come first. Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man did not think too much. They moved their feet and arrived in front of Ningyu in a moment. Ningyu stretched out his hands, patted them on the shoulders, and said solemnly, "Your task is very difficult. As long as He Jiming and Enhalping have the thought of escaping, you will kill them." Ningyu's tone was particularly heavy when he said the words "kill them." Hearing Ningyu's words, coupled with Ningyu's decisive tone, He Jiming and Enhalping's hearts both thumped. Ningyu was warning them. In fact, when Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man walked toward Ningyu, they really wanted to take the opportunity to escape. In their hearts, they believed that Ningyu would not kill them because he needed their help. But now it seemed that their thinking was a little simple. They did not doubt the loyalty of Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man. As long as they dared to run, Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man would dare to kill them, because Ningyu gave him the right to report first. Behave yourself. Just as He Jiming was thinking in his heart, Zhang Chong had already come to his side. His right hand slapped his shoulder heavily, and he said coldly, "If you let me know that you dare to release your perception, I will definitely peel your skin and pull out your tendons." Zhang Chong's tone was tough and not sloppy at all. He Jiming was shocked, and he hurriedly withdrew his perception, not daring to be the slightest presumptuous. But soon, He Jiming realized some problems. He was just frightened by Zhang Chong, and he did not react. Now, thinking about it carefully, it seemed that when Zhang Chong patted his shoulder, there was a cold light entering his body from his shoulder. He Jiming could conclude that the cold light was blood. As for whether it was Zhang Chong's blood, He Jiming was not particularly sure. Could it be a trump card left by Ningyu? He Jiming glanced at Ningyu with the corner of his eye, trying to see some clues from Ningyu's reaction. But unfortunately, Ningyu had been closing his eyes, and his facial expression did not change at all. Maybe I'm thinking too much. Shaking his head, He Jiming put this idea behind him. Ningyu gave Zhang Chong a death order. Maybe the blood that entered his body was Zhang Chong's. After all, Ningyu controlled Zhang Chong, and Zhang Chong must do what Ningyu told him. The same thing had happened to Enhalping. Compared to He Jiming, Enhalping was more cautious. On the one hand, he pretended to be very frightened, and, on the other hand, he began to carefully expel the drop of blood that had just entered his body. This little interlude was soon over. This area also returned to silence again. At the same time, not far from the Emperor Palace, Buzz, there was a slight tremor in the void, and then two figures appeared. Trash is really trash. Among the two figures, one had a cold face, and the other always had a smile. Among them, the cold man said in a cold voice, "Enhalping can't even do this small thing. We really shouldn't have let him join us." "Haha, don't be angry." Smiling Tiger smiled and said, "It's not bad for us to let Enhalping join us. Although he can't accomplish anything, with him at the front, the Zhang family will definitely not vent their anger on us. If the Zhang family and the family fight, we can reap the benefits." The cold man glanced at Smiling Tiger coldly and did not speak. Although what the Smiling Tiger said was true, the cold-looking man was more cautious because of this. Be careful. It would be a bit embarrassing if Smiling Tiger did not know what he was thinking at this time. If Smiling Tiger knew what the cold man was thinking at this time, he would probably shout that he was wronged. He dared to plot against the Zhang family and the family, but he dared not to plot against the cold man's family. What should we do now? The silence lasted for about 3 minutes, and it was still the cold man who spoke first. "Let's wait for a few more minutes, then we'll go in together." Smiling Tiger stopped smiling, and his expression became serious. A plan was still a plan. Before success, there was a possibility of failure. The reason why the two of them did not enter the Emperor Palace was because they were afraid. They could plot against Enhaoping, but what if Enhaoping had secretly contacted the Zhang family and set a trap for them in the Emperor Palace? The higher their level, the more things they had to worry about. They knew better than anyone that a slight move could affect the whole situation. Once the plan was leaked, the two families would be condemned by everyone. It would be difficult for them to survive in the demonic spirit realm. Chapter 1758. Peaceful time was always short. Ningyu thought he could hold on for 10 minutes. Unexpectedly, in the 9th minute, the stony-faced man and the smiling tiger tore the void and appeared in front of Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man. Bang! Bang! The stony-faced man faced Zhang Chong, and the smiling tiger faced the white-haired old man. Because it was a sneak attack, Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man fell heavily to the ground when two crisp sounds were heard. The stony-faced man and the smiling tiger were not fools. As soon as they tore the void, they guessed what had happened. Therefore, when they repelled Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man, they sealed Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man. In order to seal the white-haired old man and Zhang Chong, they did not hesitate to use two ancient scrolls from their family. The stony-faced man and the smiling tiger only sealed Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man, but they were not stupid enough to seal Zhang Chong and Enhaoping. Since they guessed that Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man were controlling He Jiming and Enhaoping, they only needed to control Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man. Because controlling Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man meant controlling Enhaoping, and it was the kind of control that Enhaoping could not resist. Fortunately, I have a backup plan. Seeing that Zhang Chong and the white-haired old man were controlled, Ningyu could not help but feel lucky. However, at the same time, Ningyu's face became a little gloomy. If Zhang Chong did not find the stony-faced man, it would be excusable. After all, there was a level difference between their cultivation. However, the white-haired old man did not find the smiling tiger, which was a big problem. After the white-haired old man showed his trump card, his cultivation reached the late stage of sage. Could the smiling tiger hide from the white-haired old man, who was also a late-stage sage? The answer was obviously no. However, at this time, it was not convenient for Ningyu to be entangled with the white-haired old man. He looked straight at the smiling tiger and said coldly, "What do you mean? Why did you break into the divine Emperor Palace without my permission?" Ningyu's tone was very tough. He considered himself the master of the divine Emperor Palace. Although Ningyu looked tough, he actually had his own considerations. There was only 1 minute left before the human demon would recover to the peak of the late sage realm. He had persisted for the first 9 minutes. If he dropped the ball at the last minute, it would be a huge loss. Although Ningyu had not spoken to the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger, it did not hinder Ningyu's performance. At this time, as long as they could wait for 1 more minute, just 1 more minute, all the problems would be solved. Early phase Heavenly Sovereign. Ningyu's words attracted the attention of the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger. When they tore through the void and appeared, whether it was Zhang Chong, the white-haired old man, He Jiming, and Enhaoping, or even the dead dog Zhang Kejuan, they all noticed them. Ningyu was the only one who didn't catch their attention. Actually, it was no wonder that they didn't notice Ningyu. After all, Ningyu's cultivation was only at the initial phase Heavenly Sovereign Realm. The gap between an early phase Heavenly Supreme and a late phase Saint Realm was like a chasm. The cold-looking man and the smiling tiger did not believe that Ningyu could cross over. Over the years, they had seen many geniuses, but those that could reach the late phase Saint Realm from the initial phase Heavenly Sovereign Realm were extremely rare, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to describe them as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. Therefore, it was completely reasonable for them to ignore Ningyu. "I'm the one asking you questions now. Don't change the subject." Ningyu resisted the urge to lose his temper and said coldly, "I'm asking you why you trespassed into the Emperor Divine Palace. If you don't give me an explanation today, don't blame me for being impolite. Is there really a problem?" Ningyu's calm performance made the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger a little confused. Ordinary, early-phase, heavenly supreme warriors, no matter how talented they were, would be very timid and afraid when they saw them. But now, Ningyu's reaction was completely beyond their expectations. Not only was Ningyu calm, but he also seemed to be fearless. This situation naturally made the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger think more. "He's Jiming. Go and catch him for me." After thinking about it, the cold-looking man kicked He Jiming's butt and said in a deep voice, "I'd like to see what he's capable of and whether he's pretending to be weak." Swoosh! The cold-looking man's voice fell, and He Jiming's ears like a bolt from the blue. He Jiming didn't want to go against Ningyu now. To be honest, seeing Ningyu's calm performance, He Jiming suddenly became worried. He Jiming had been in contact with Ningyu for a period of time, so he knew Ningyu's character better. Ningyu never did things that he was not confident of. This time, Ningyu's performance was so calm. If Ningyu didn't have a trump card, He Jiming wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. Human Demon. According to He Jiming's guess, the trump card that made Ningyu so fearless was the Human Demon. The Human Demon was a ruthless person. If the Human Demon suddenly attacked, wouldn't he be courting death? No problem. He Jiming was not a fool. He patted his chest and promised. At the same time, he began to communicate with the sect, wanting to confirm when the sect's powerhouses would descend. "Why, do you have a problem?" Seeing that He Jiming agreed not to take action, the cold-looking man's face became even colder. A cold voice came out of his mouth. "I'll give you 3 seconds. If you don't complete my instructions in 3 seconds, then what about you? Do you want to kill He Jiming?" Before the cold-looking man's cold voice had finished, a faint voice came out of the void. Hearing that, the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger's faces changed, and they couldn't help but take a few steps back. As for He Jiming, he revealed a look of ecstasy. The moment the faint voice came out, He Jiming knew that he was saved. There was no other reason. He Jiming knew the martial artist who made the voice. He Jiming, what you're doing right now is really shaming the sect. Following the voice, a skinny martial artist appeared out of the void. The skinny martial artist was around 30 years old. His face was slightly pale, and he looked sickly. Young. Although he was scolded by the skinny martial artist, He Jiming did not dare to show any dissatisfaction. He hurriedly opened his mouth, wanting to explain. However, when he saw the skinny martial artist's face, he swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. After rearranging his thoughts, He Jiming said, "This matter is my responsibility. When I return to the sect, I'll take the initiative to—" All right. I don't want to talk nonsense with you." The skinny martial artist waved his hand and interrupted He Jiming's words. He said impatiently, "You just need to tell me if the two of them are enemies." The skinny martial artist's words made the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger's hearts skip a beat. Their faces turned very ugly. The skinny martial artist's meaning was clear. As long as He Jiming nodded, he would take action. There is only one reason why the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger would have such expressions. Chapter 1759. He's an enemy, but not the main one. He Jiming felt that he could not let the aloof man off easily no matter what. However, He Jiming was still very sensible. The most important enemy at this stage was not the aloof man or the smiling tiger, but Ningyu. To be more precise, it was Ningyu and the human demon who was hiding in the dark. Cut the crap. The skinny martial artist did not care what He Jiming said. To him, since the aloof man and the smiling tiger were enemies, he should kill them all. The skinny martial artist said coldly. In the next moment, the skinny martial artist's body shot out and charged at the aloof man and the smiling tiger at a terrifying speed. Damn it! The aloof man and the smiling tiger cursed inwardly when they saw the skinny martial artist charging at them and immediately retreated. Although the aloof man and the smiling tiger were late-stage sage, they would not fight the skinny martial artist who was at the peak of the sage realm unless they had no other choice. They would not fight if they could run. Rumble. It was obvious that the aloof man and the smiling tiger had underestimated the combat strength of a peak sage realm martial artist. The skinny martial artist had only casually waved his hand and completely sealed off their escape route, forcing them to fight. The aloof man and the smiling tiger were constantly being pushed back by the skinny martial artist's powerful attacks. They had no chance of winning at all. If there was no external interference, the aloof man and the smiling tiger would probably only need 3 minutes to defeat the aloof man and the smiling tiger. Once the aloof man and the smiling tiger were defeated, the skinny martial artist's next target would definitely be Ningyu. Get close to the white-haired old man. I'll find a way to remove the seal on him. At this moment, the human demon's solemn voice sounded in Ningyu's ears. Ningyu was stunned when he heard this. Then, he moved his feet and slowly approached the white-haired old man. The human demon had long recovered to his peak state, and his cultivation had also reached the peak of the late-stage sage realm. The original human demon wanted to suddenly attack and capture the aloof man and the smiling tiger, as well as Jiming and the others in one fell swoop. However, the sudden appearance of the thin martial artist completely disrupted the demonic humans' plans. In the higher planes, the demonic humans were indeed very strong. Their true cultivation was even a level higher than the thin martial artist. But this was the immortal spirit region. This was the Emperor God Palace. The skinny martial artist was at the peak of the sage realm, while the demonic human was only at the peak of the late sage realm. Relying on his battle experience, the human demon boasted that he could easily defeat 2 or even 3 late-stage Saint Realm warriors. However, the human demon had no chance of winning against the skinny warrior who was at the peak of the sage realm. The only thing they could do now was to form an alliance. Ningyu could guess what human demon was thinking, so he carefully approached the white-haired old man while keeping an eye on the battlefield. As long as human demon removed the seal on the white-haired old man, and Haoping, who looked like a dead dog, and the powerful human demon would be able to kill them all, he might really be able to wrestle with the thin martial artist and see who would be the final winner. But now, Ningyu could only be as careful as he could be. On one hand, he could not let the skinny martial artist know. On the other hand, he could not let Jiming know. Although Jiming looked worthless in front of the skinny martial artist, he had a sharp nose. Once he caught a whiff of trouble, the first thing he would do to Ning would be even more difficult. Crack! The skinny martial artist was swift and decisive, while the human demon was not the least bit hesitant. In less than 3 minutes, the human demon removed the seal on the white-haired old man. Puffed, puffed. The moment the seal on the white-haired old man was removed, the faces of the smiling tiger and the cold man changed. They revealed some flaws. The skinny martial artist was good at finding flaws. Almost at the same time the cold man and the smiling tiger revealed their flaws, the skinny martial artist's 2 terrifying attacks landed on their chests. The cold-looking man and the smiling tiger did not hesitate to spit out 2 mouthfuls of blood at the same time after being hit in the chest by the 2 terrifying attacks. Their complexions became extremely pale. This is impossible. Even though the skinny martial artist had seized the opportunity, the cold man and the smiling tiger's pupils constricted. Their faces were filled with disbelief. In order to seal the white-haired old man, the 2 of them did not hesitate to use an ancient scroll. Using an ancient scroll to seal a late-stage sage martial artist was a loss no matter how one looked at it. However, the current situation made the cold man and the smiling tiger unable to say anything. It's not right to side with Ningyu, but it's also not right not to side with him. For a moment, they were caught in a dilemma. And Haoping, it's all your fault. In his anger, the cold man glanced at Haoping and said coldly, "You solve this matter. If you can't solve it, there's no need for you to exist." "What do you mean?" And Haoping was so angry that his hair stood on end. He said angrily, "You 2 late-stage sage martial artists can't even deal with the skinny martial artist. Why should I do it?" And Haoping was not someone who could be fooled. Moreover, and Haoping was still very angry in his heart. "Where were you when I made my move just now? If the 3 of us attack together, we wouldn't have to worry about not being able to take down the white-haired old man and the others. Even if we couldn't take down Ningyu, we could definitely take down He Jiming. The skinny martial artist obviously came from the same sect as He Jiming. Taking down He Jiming could make the skinny martial artist have some scruples and not dare to make a big move. Now, you guys didn't do anything when you should. Now that there's a problem, you want me to take care of it? How could this be? Noisy. The skinny martial artist did not care how the cold man and the smiling tiger quarreled. As he let out a soft shout, he stomped on the ground and quickly dashed forward. If the skinny martial artist had used 50% of his strength just now, then he was using 100% of his strength now. Go out and block him. Seeing the skinny martial artist charging over aggressively, the cold man and the smiling tiger looked at each other, then raised their right feet at the same time and kicked enhaoping's butt. Swoosh! After being kicked in the butt by two huge forces, enhaoping felt his body become light and immediately flew toward the skinny martial artist. You guys will die a horrible death. Enhaoping's expression changed drastically and he let out a hysterical roar. Even if I become a ghost, I will never let you go. Let's go. The cold man and the smiling tiger did not take enhaoping's roar to heart at all. They teared the void together and their bodies went straight into it. As the saying went, where there's life, there's hope. At such a critical moment, sacrificing enhaoping was the best way. Moreover, the main person who schemed against the Zhang family this time was enhaoping. The two of them did not participate too much. Even if the Zhang family knew, they could not do anything. They could only vent their anger on their families and fight to the death with the Yin family. Chapter 1760. Buzz. The cold-looking man and the smiling tiger left as soon as they said they would, without any hesitation. Before enhaoping could face the thin cultivator head-on, the two of them had already drilled into the void and disappeared. Senior human demon, should we leave now? The sudden disappearance of the stern man and the smiling tiger made Ning Yu's heart loosen a little, and enhaoping blocking the skinny cultivator was the best chance to leave. In fact, Ning Yu had already thought of a countermeasure. The main thing was that if the human demon decided to retreat, he would immediately activate the blood of the god of war in enhaoping's body and give the skinny cultivator a strong dose of medicine. At that time, even if enhaoping did not self-destruct, he would definitely severely injure the skinny cultivator and slow him down. There's no need to leave. Inside the Yuzuan pagoda, the human demon shook his head slowly. No matter what, the skinny cultivator is still a peak sage. Do you really think that's all he's capable of? Ning Yu's heart skipped a beat when he heard that, and he could not help but look at the skinny cultivator. Golden cicada, shedding its carapace. For some reason, these words suddenly appeared in Ning Yu's mind when he saw the skinny cultivator's calm expression. Although Ning Yu was not a sage cultivator, he was well aware of the difference between a late-stage sage and a peak sage. Under normal circumstances, two late-stage sage cultivators would definitely not be a match for a peak sage cultivator. In other words, even if the skinny cultivator was held back by enhaoping, there was still a way to take down the stern man and the smiling tiger. Don't forget, enhaoping would not foolishly hold back the skinny cultivator for the stern man and the smiling tiger. There was a saying that went, "If you're heartless, don't blame me for being unjust. I surrender. I choose to surrender." Seeing that he was about to clash with the skinny cultivator, enhaoping yelled, "As long as you don't kill me, I'll do anything." He Jiming looked at enhaoping with contempt, his eyes full of disdain. He Jiming wondered how a cultivator with no backbone like enhaoping had managed to cultivate to the late-stage sage level. Little did he know that while He Jiming was suspicious, Ning Yu was also suspicious. How did a stupid fool like He Jiming get selected by the sect to come to Emperor God Palace? Xiao, the skinny martial artist, didn't seem to hear enhaoping's words. His speed wasn't slow at all. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of enhaoping. Let's fight. Since he could not make the thin cultivator stop, enhaoping decided to go all out and fight head-on with the thin cultivator. Even if he was going to die, he had to die with honor. He couldn't die sullenly. However, Just as Enhaoping decided to fight to the death, the thin cultivator's figure gradually turned illusory. In the end, it even completely disappeared. What happened? The skinny martial artist's sudden disappearance left Enhaoping scratching his head in confusion. Just a moment ago, the thin martial artist wanted to kill him. Why did he suddenly stop? Also, after the thin martial artist disappeared, where did he go? Enhaoping was not the only one who had such doubts. Even Hijiming was confused. Relatively speaking, Hijiming was more worried. What if the thin martial artist really disappeared? What should he do? Whether it was the white-haired elder or Enhaoping, their cultivation was higher than his. At this time, once Enhaoping joined forces with Ningyu and the others, he would be in an irrecoverable situation. Bang! Bang! As it turned out, Hijiming was overthinking. The worry in his heart only lasted for a few seconds before completely disappearing. 2 consecutive crisp sounds rang out in this area. As far as the eye could see, the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger had both landed heavily on the ground not far away, falling face first onto the ground. Want to escape from my hands? You're still too young. After defeating the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger, the thin martial artist flicked his sleeves, and suddenly, 2 cold lights flew out. Poof! Poof! The speed of the cold lights was very fast. In the blink of an eye, they entered the bodies of the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger. What did you do to us? The cold-looking man and the smiling tiger looked at each other and saw deep fear in each other's eyes. In fact, without the thin martial artist saying anything, they had already guessed what the cold lights were. There was no doubt that the cold lights were a means of control by the thin martial artist. If there was no accident, as long as the thin martial artist wanted to, they would immediately die. Why are you still asking when you already know? What a waste of my time. The skinny cultivator glared fiercely at the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger and said in a deep voice, "You'd better stay put. Without my permission, if anyone dares to say a word, I'll make you pay." The thin martial artist's naked threat made the faces of the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger extremely gloomy, but was very helpless. They could only be angry in their hearts and did not dare to show any dissatisfaction on the surface. After leaving a cold sentence, the thin martial artist moved toward Ningyu. After a while, the thin martial artist came in front of Ningyu and said lightly, "First, let me introduce myself. My name is Lu Chuanji, and I come from Sacred Divine Palace." Sacred Divine Palace? Ningyu was slightly stunned. Obviously, he had not heard of the name Sacred Divine Palace. But thinking of Emperor Divine Palace, Ningyu felt relieved. Sacred Divine Palace must be a superior sect to Emperor Divine Palace. Is he really not from a higher plane? Seeing Ningyu's reaction, Lu Chuanji frowned and seemed a little surprised. The reason why Lu Chuanji did not rashly attack Ningyu was that he felt a terrifying aura from Ningyu. Although this terrifying aura had not reached the peak of the Sage Realm, it was not much weaker. As a key figure in Sacred Divine Palace, Lu Chuanji would think carefully before doing anything and would not offend people for no reason. Although the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger had high cultivation, they were both from a lower plane, so it would not be troublesome for them to attack them. On Ningyu's side, due to the terrifying aura, Lu Chuanji did not attack immediately. Instead, he wanted to test Ningyu. Let the person behind you come out. Since Ningyu was not from a higher plane, Lu Chuanji was completely relieved. Cold words came out of Lu Chuanji's mouth. "You're not qualified to talk to me." Lu Chuanji was very arrogant, extremely arrogant. On the other side, Ningyu could not help but frown. As an early Heaven Supreme, I am indeed not qualified to talk to you, who is at the peak of the Sage Realm. Ningyu's eyebrows quickly relaxed, and he said slowly, "At least you know your place," Lu Chuanji said proudly. However, just as Lu Chuanji was feeling pleased with himself, Ningyu's indifferent voice sounded again. "The phrase, 'know your place,' may not be suitable for me." Ningyu waved his hand and interrupted Lu Chuanji's words. He said indifferently, "I am not qualified to talk to you." What if there is a white-haired elder in the late stage of the sage realm? And in helping in the late stage of the sage realm? Chapter 1761. Plus Yijiming. Hearing Ning use words, Lu Chuanji was slightly stunned at first. Then his face changed dramatically, and he hurriedly turned his eyes to He Jiming. Puff! As soon as Lu Chuanji's eyes moved to He Jiming, he saw He Jiming open his mouth and suddenly spit out a big mouthful of red blood. How is it possible? He Jiming's pupils shrank sharply, and he stared at Ningyu as if he had seen a ghost, his face full of disbelief, doubt, puzzlement, and anger. All kinds of emotions appeared on He Jiming's face. All the time, He Jiming thought that he was controlled by Zhang Chong. Now he was suddenly told that his life was controlled by Ningyu. How could he not be shocked? While shocked, He Jiming was also trying to recall how Ningyu controlled him. I know. After just 1 second, He Jiming understood everything. There is no doubt that the reason why Ningyu could control him must have something to do with the drop of blood that entered his body not long ago. At that time, he thought that the drop of blood belonged to Zhang Chong, and Zhang Chong injected it into his body to deepen his control over him. Who would have thought that the drop of blood belonged to Ningyu? Now that he was controlled by Ningyu, He Jiming's heart sank to the bottom. If he fell into Zhang Chong's hands, there was still a chance of survival. But if he fell into the hands of Ningyu, He Jiming dared not imagine. With Ningyu's character, how could he let him go? Young master, save me. The more he thought, the more frightened He Jiming was. He even regarded Lu Chuanji as the last life-saving straw and wanted to grasp it tightly. Shut up. Lu Chuanji's face was cold. He raised his right hand and slapped He Jiming's cheek hard. Pa! An extremely crisp sound rang out in the area. Lu Chuanji's slap directly knocked out a few of He Jiming's teeth, and blood swirled in He Jiming's mouth. Save me. Only you can save me now, young master. He Jiming completely ignored the injury in his mouth and hurriedly crawled toward Lu Chuanji, shouting at the same time. Stop right there. Lu Chuanji's expression was extremely gloomy as he berated He Jiming. If you dare to take another step forward, I will definitely cut you into 8 pieces. Seeing Lu Chuanji's angry expression, He Jiming's heart thumped, and he immediately chose to stay where he was. He Jiming was still very self-aware. Although only Lu Chuanji could save his life, he didn't want to force Lu Chuanji too much at this critical moment. If he angered him and the news got out, he would definitely end up in a miserable state. Glaring fiercely at He Jiming, Lu Chuanji turned to look at Ningyu and said in a low voice, Speak. What do I have to do for you to release that trash? You're quite arrogant. Even a sage intermediate stage warrior is trash. Ningyu shrugged and said, My request is very simple. Give me the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger. That's impossible. Lu Chuanji's face turned ashen. He said angrily, Change the terms. I'm sorry, I only have one condition. Ningyu curled his lips and said, Give me the control of the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger, and I will immediately release He Jiming. By the way, I'll take the liberty to remind you that don't test my patience. As long as you dare to attack me or try to save He Jiming, I will make He Jiming suffer a little pain. Suffer a little pain. Crack! Lu Chuanji clenched his fists tightly, making cracking sounds. His face was full of anger. How could Lu Chuanji not know what wishful thinking Ningyu had in mind? As long as he gave the control of the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger to Ningyu, then Ningyu would have 4 late-stage Sage Realm warriors in his hands. The cold-looking man, the smiling tiger, the white-haired old man, and an Haoping. 1 against 2, Lu Chuanji could kill them perfectly. However, 1 against 4, Lu Chuanji would have some obstacles. However, the 4 late-stage Sage Realm warriors were secondary. Lu Chuanji only worried about one problem. That was, what was the cultivation of the warrior hidden in Ningyu's body? If the other party was only at the late-stage Sage Realm, he would not need to worry so much. But if the other party was at the peak Sage Realm, then with the help of 4 late-stage Sage Realm warriors, he would be in danger. I can give you the control of the cold-looking man and the smiling tiger. After thinking about it, Lu Chuanji fixed his eyes on Ningyu and said coldly, "But in addition to He Jiming, you have to let Di Xiao go." Let Di Xiao go. Ningyu's expression froze, and his mind gradually became active. Ningyu had long known that Di Xiao was not simple, and that he had some secrets. However, his own strength was limited, and the human demon was on guard, so he could not study Di Xiao in a short time. Now that Lu Chuanji suddenly mentioned Di Xiao, Ningyu had to think about it. Yes, let He Jiming and Di Xiao go. Feeling that he had said too much, Lu Chuanji nodded and said, "Di Xiao is the last warrior besides He Jiming. You have to let him go." "Let Di Xiao go. It's not impossible, but I have a condition." Ningyu shrugged and said, "What condition?" Lu Chuanji asked, suppressing his anger and dissatisfaction. "You come from a high-level world. Just give me a few million fairy crystals and a few dozen heavenly materials and earthly treasures." Ningyu waved his hand and said casually. Hearing this, Lu Chuanji was so angry that his nose almost became crooked. What big tone. A few million fairy crystals was fine, but he also wanted a few dozen heavenly materials and earthly treasures. Was he out of his mind? "Ningyu, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't ask for too much, or I will definitely make you suffer." Seeing Ningyu ask for so many fairy crystals and heavenly materials and earthly treasures, He Jiming hurriedly roared. But when Lu Chuanji looked at He Jiming's voice stopped abruptly. In front of Ningyu, He Jiming could roar and be unbridled because he felt that Ningyu was afraid of Lu Chuanji. But in front of Lu Chuanji, He Jiming did not dare to behave atrociously. Although he had a trump card given to him by the sect elder, and even Lu Chuanji had to rely on him to obtain the origin energy in the celestial spirit realm. But it was better to be safe than sorry. What if Lu Chuanji also had a trump card? After all, Lu Chuanji was the young master of Sacred Divine Palace. It was understandable that he had a trump card with him when he personally descended to the celestial spirit realm. It was conceivable that if Lu Chuanji had a trump card that could obtain the origin energy, there would be no need for him to stay. Therefore, Lu Chuanji's every move affected He Jiming's state of mind, making him restless. "I don't have many fairy crystals on me, and I'm not used to carrying heavenly materials and earthly treasures with me." Lu Chuanji retracted his thoughts and shook his head gently. "How about this? I have an elixir on me. As long as you let He Jiming and Di Xiao go, I can give it to you." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.